are ready. You want me to talk about something specific? And begin.
Good morning. Today is a special day. It's tax day, so we'll go ahead and call to order the April 15, 2014 meeting of the Indian River County Board of County Commissioners. I'd like to start off with an invocation by Deputy Teddy Floyd with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, followed by the pledge led by Joe Baird, County Administrator. Would everyone please rise? And Teddy, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. Let us bow our heads. Father, we thank you. We thank you for this great day. We thank you for everything that is involved with it, for the building and the element of Indian River County. We ask now, let us be your hands, that we'll be able to fix the things that we know how to fix. Let us be your eyes. Let us be able to see the things that need fixing. And God, let us have your mindset that we'll be understanding, being able to understand that we got to come together for one common cause, and that's to make everything as better as we can. And Father, if you would, we just want to thank you so very, very much for everybody in their respectful places. Thank you for the sheriff. Thank you for the city commissioners, for everyone. And let us say amen.
Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can't wait to see that video.
Thank you. Under additions and deletions, we have a couple of things here, gentlemen. First, I would like to add just a really brief announcement about the Jackie Robinson game tonight at Dodgertown, if you all don't mind. And also, I had a request from Sebastian Councilmember Richard Gilmore to be added to the public discussion, so that would be 10B2. And then Commissioner Davis, I believe you have requested an item under 14B1 regarding staff and an ordinance to be addressed?
That is correct. Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there any other additions or deletions to the agenda?
To the chair, I believe also that the speaker who wanted to speak under public hearings 10B1, Mr. Rigby had asked the item be pulled from the agenda today.
Thank you very much, Dylan. So that'll be item 10B1 will be deleted. Is there anything else, gentlemen?
Move as amended.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flesher, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Takes us to proclamations and presentations. First is a presentation of a proclamation designating the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. And this will be presented by Commissioner Flesher and received, is Chris Robertson from Castle? Good morning. Come on up. Commissioner Flesher.
Good morning. I've just found out that I'm presenting the proclamation. So
Does somebody else have it?
Did you have the proclamation?
No.
It's in there, but
Just happen to have a copy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I now have the honor of presenting this proclamation, and good morning. I appreciate your attendance here to receive this proclamation on a very important arena. I wish we did not have to have this presentation or proclamation, and perhaps someday this can be put in the annals of the history of our society. But until then, we appreciate what you do and what everyone does to step up to the plate and address the child abuse. The proclamation reads as follows, designating the month of April 2014 as Child Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas child abuse and neglect is a serious and growing problem affecting more than 3 million of our nation's children annually and over 110,000 in the state of Florida. And whereas this societal malignancy called child abuse and neglect respects no religion, class, or geographical boundaries, and in fact has been declared a national emergency. Whereas CASEL, the premier organization of the prevention of child abuse in Indian River County, through their support of the parent aid programs, parenting classes, and educational programs, and community service activities, is making significant progress in stopping the crime against our nation's and community's children and family. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the month of April 2014 be designated as Child Abuse Prevention Month in Indian River County, and we urge all citizens to use this time to better understand and recognize and respond to this serious problem. Duly adopted this 15th day of April 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Good morning.
Can I say a couple quick words?
Please, most certainly.
Okay. My name is Chris Robertson. I'm the development director with Castle. Castle's been around for 33 years, preventing child abuse and neglect all along the Treasure Coast. Here in Indian River County, many of you have seen the white flags that fly, and that's our memory field that flies every year. And that's in dedication and memorializes the children who lost their lives as a result of abuse or neglect in the state of Florida the previous year. This year there were 122 flags. 122 children that will not get the chance to be a commissioner, will not get the chance to be a firefighter or policeman. So we put this field out there to memorialize those children, to speak for them, because they can no longer speak for themselves. We are out there putting awareness out there to try to curb this. We realize child abuse is a cycle, and because some of the abusers don't know how to parent. And that's why we're here to teach them and give them the tools and to break that cycle of child abuse. So thank you, Indian River County, and all of the participants that participate in Memory Field and help put that out there, and also all of our staff and our board for creating awareness out there. But thank you very much for the proclamation, and we appreciate your support.
We appreciate your educational endeavors. As it's been said many times, there's no manual on parenting. There's no direction. You know, once there's no high school or college class that prepares you well enough to parent the child. So we count on you, and we count on all the volunteers in the community. I know it's a tremendous burden on our sheriff's office and law enforcement agencies, and I know that I've worked with Castle in the meetings, and it's quite a difficult concept to address, but we appreciate what you're doing.
Right. Thank you very much.
You.
And Chris, we apparently had a little mix-up on the physical proclamation, but we will find it and get it to you. Okay?
Great. I appreciate it.
A picture of this one, though?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
please.
We'll come out for a picture.
Okay.
Good thinking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, hit you?
Oh, we have somebody.
I don't know.
Scott, can you do a picture for him?
We got the word out.
Hanging in the break room.
We'll need that one back, though, Chris.
Thank you.
Don't let him walk off with this one.
Where did you see yours?
There we go.
Chris, thank you.
We mean it. We do need
We do need that back.
Okay, at least you got his phone back.
Next is a presentation of a proclamation recognizing National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. And I'll have the honor of presenting this. I believe we have the Sheriff Darrell Lohr here with some of his members. So, Sheriff, if you and your team will come on up, please.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome. This is a proclamation recognizing National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers and firefighters is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Indian River County Sheriff's Office Dispatch Center. And whereas public safety dispatchers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services, and whereas public safety dispatchers are a vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities, providing them with information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety dispatchers of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of crime, and treatment of patients. They are knowledgeable and highly trained individuals who work closely with police, fire, and medical personnel. And whereas each dispatcher has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their duties in the past year. And whereas Indian River County Sheriff's Office public safety dispatchers dispatched 219,131 calls for service for law enforcement and 23,821 calls for fire rescue in 2013. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County, Florida, that the Board recognizes April 13 through April 19, 2014 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our county and citizens safe. Adopted this day, 15th day of April, 2014, signed by all 5 county commissioners. And Sheriff, tell us how your team handled over 240,000 calls last year.
Well, it's incredible. And Commissioners, good morning. On behalf of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, an honor and a pleasure for me to accept this proclamation. It could not happen without the team, the dynamic team that we have that answers so many questions and so many calls. I'll tell you that about 30% of our operators turn over each year. So it's a high stress job and it's a high turnover. But we're led by Captain Don Smith over that particular unit, Lieutenant Mark Buffington, and the always present Miss Sandy Fox that each and every one of you know. Such a stressful job, as Commissioner Zork and Commissioner Fletcher both have experience, not only in ambulance but in fire and police in several different jurisdictions. But when that one call comes in, that is your lifeline, and we're very proud to represent the residents of Indian River County. And Ms. Fox has a few words to say.
Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you very much. We certainly appreciate that you recognize the job that we do, and we hope that one day it will be recognized as a profession and a career, something that most people don't normally say they want to be a 911 operator, but it's definitely growing. A lot of things are changing. I apologize that there are not other dispatchers here this morning, but they they had another engagement for Fellsmere. They actually had done something special for us today for National Telecommunicators Week. So I appreciate it, and we thank you very much.
Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Let me give that to you.
Sheriff, good morning. Scott, can you grab one more picture from that morning? Sure. Thanks for coming. Nice to see you again, sir. How are you? Very good.
Hey, I'll give
That's not good with Sheriff. That's bad as
Thank you very much. He's just going to give you a ticket.
Even I can figure that out.
Got it.
Good job, everybody. Thank you very much. Next is a presentation of a proclamation designating April 1st through April 30, 2014 as Water Conservation Month in Indian River County. This will be presented by Commissioner Slaughter, and we have Vincent Burke, Director of Utilities, here to receive this. Commissioner Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Burke. Good morning. I'm very happy today to read this proclamation designating April 1st through April 30th, 2014 as Water Conservation Month in Indian River County. Whereas water is an essential commodity in which human life, and indeed all life on earth, depends. And whereas clean and sustainable water resources are vital to Indian River County's economy, environment, citizens, and visitors. And whereas the state of Florida water management districts and Indian River County are working together to increase awareness about the importance of water conservation. And whereas every business, visitor, and resident can make a difference when it comes to saving water. And whereas Indian River County Utilities has always encouraged and supported water conservation efforts. And whereas the population served by Indian River County Utilities has increased over the past 3 years, yet the per capita consumption of those customers has decreased. And whereas water conservation is the easiest and least costly approach at preserving our finite natural resource. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County that the month of April 2014 be designated as Water Conservation Month in Indian River County, and all citizens are encouraged to use this occasion to increase their awareness of the importance of water conservation and the need to use water more efficiently. Adopted this 15th day of April 2014 and signed by all 5 members of the Board of County Commissioners. Good morning, Vincent.
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Solari. Thank you, Commissioners, for recognizing April as Water Conservation Month. For the record, I'm Vincent Burke, Director of Utility Services. What you may or may not know is that 2014 marks the 16th anniversary since April was designated as Water Conservation Month. So to that effect, with this proclamation today, we will be notifying the Florida statutes, or the Florida section of the AWWA, American Water Works Association. It will be recognized with other counties and municipalities that have also recognized April as Water Conservation Month. I think the second to last whereas clause mentioned that we had increased population. In fact, we went back 4 years, and in 2010 we had approximately 100,563 folks that were served by Indian River County. We had used approximately 8.23 million gallons per day at that period of time. Fast forward to 2013, 4 years later, population served is 103,997 folks. The total water produced and sent out to our distribution was 7.76 million gallons per day. That equates to a population increase of 3.4% and actually a decrease of 6.1% on our water conservation. So I think it has to do with awareness, has to do with education and outreach, and has to do with folks that are being more savvy with the water use. And so there are things that people can do at their house that are simple. They can shut the water off when they're brushing their teeth. They can install some water-saving appliances, low-flow shower heads. Toilets that used to flush at 3.5 gallons per flush now can be flushed using only 1.2 to 1.28 gallons per flush. There are things that folks can do outside in their lawn to perhaps use a cistern or maybe collect some rainwater, a little bit more involved, but also to know when they should water, how often they should water, and they can go to the district website, St. Johns River Water Management District website. We also have a tiered rate structure in Indian River County that actually prohibits, so the more water you use, the higher rates that you pay. And these are all efforts to try to, again, educate consumers to reduce less water. So again, I'd like to thank not only Scott for helping us put the information on the website, but staff, meter readers that actually look at the meters to see if a meter's spinning out of control, to try to notify homeowners, but through the education outreach, not only internal to the utilities, but getting the word out with today's proclamation. So thank you, Commissioners.
Yeah, Vincent, I'd like to mention 2 other things for water conservation, which are really very easy. One is the move to a Florida-friendly yard, which does include more than rocks generally. And I'll just note that I have a separate irrigation meter, and for the first 2 bills of this year, the consumption was 0. But that only works, we have an irrigation system, but if you don't put it on manual and just hit the switch when you actually need water, you actually save water. One of the worst things that happens is when people have it on automatic, and you get 2 inches of rain, and the next morning their irrigation goes on. That is one of the great wastes of our natural resource, and one that's very easily corrected. So I thank you and the Utility Department's efforts in this regard, and I'll have a shout out to the St. Johns River Water Management District for all the work they've done in this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Joe.
Now you got to keep that trend.
I think the confusion is the thing about what's up here and not in this yard.
I haven't washed my truck in 2 months.
We haven't washed it. Was he going to take a picture? Yeah. Okay.
Do those rocks grow?
You know, Peter, paybacks are hell. Just remember.
It was just too easy.
You know, sometimes restraint is the better path.
It was a softball laying up there, just had to take a swat. Next is a presentation of Keep Indian River Beautiful educational program by Vicki Wild, Executive Director. And Vicki, you've got a team over there. You want to bring them all up?
If you'd like, sure.
Yes.
Thanks. I brought some of my board members. I'd like to thank them for coming out and showing their support. Come on, Troy, you're too. Come on. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I appreciate you, commissioners, and I also appreciate the community for allowing us to continue to help in this. So, for the record, hello, my name is Vicki Wild. I'm the Executive Director of Keep Indian River Beautiful. I've been in this position for 3.5 years. I'm a born and raised Floridian, and I've lived in Indian River County for 9 years. So, as you know, Keep Indian River Beautiful, we have several core programs with our cigarette litter prevention programs, our monofilament recovery programs, our Adopt a Road programs, the Reuse Exchange Center, and our conservation education. But what I wanted to talk to you today was about recycling, because I realized that each county has their own contract on how they recycle. And I've been going to a lot of different schools and a lot of different adult groups like Treasure Coast Women's, Rotary Clubs, and all that stuff. And I find that a lot of people are confused about what can actually be recycled in Indian River County. So I thought I'd just go quickly, and I know I'm being quick. In this county, we're dual stream, so we have 2 bins. So the first bin gets all of your plastic containers, which is 1 through 7. A lot of people get confused, too, with styrofoam, because styrofoam also has a triangle on it and it has numbers on it, because styrofoam is. But in this county, we can only recycle the hard white styrofoam. If it's black or has color on it, we don't do that. And you don't put your white styrofoam in a bin. You actually have to bring it to one of the 5 convenience centers. So a lot of people are confused about that because it does have a triangle and number. But in your 2 bins, you know, you get your 1 bin, get your plastics, your glass, your aluminum, your foil plates, your steel, your aerosol cans, like your PAM cans, they can go in there, and your juice and milk cartons. And then in the second bin, you can put all your paper in there, your newspaper, your phone books. You don't have to worry about staples, taking them out. If it's a hardcover book, you don't have to worry about taking it out of the hardcover. That's all fine. It can go in there. All your cereal boxes, your soda boxes, everything else. But what they require is, because the bin's small and a guy has to pick it up and he has to put it into the truck. And so they ask that you keep it nice and flat down so it's not difficult for the man to get it into the truck. And then doing so, okay, so I guess we'll start the reasons why we want to recycle. Okay, got a little nervous, sorry. So the number 1 reason is recycling. We conserve our natural resources such as trees, water, minerals, preserving the environment. Reason 2, recycling reduces the need for landfills and incinerators, because with the materials are recycled, less waste is going into disposable facilities. Number 3, recycling prevents pollution and reduces greenhouse gas emissions caused by extracting process of the raw materials. And number 4, recycling saves energy by eliminating the need to extract process of raw materials. And number 5, it creates jobs. And in the United States, both recycling and industrial manufacturing. So I thought I'd go over a couple little quick points, like an aluminum can. 32 billion aluminum cans end up in the landfill every year. The waste energy could power up to 1.5 million homes if we didn't have them in the landfill. And another thing about aluminum is that can is recycled, and then within 60 days it's back on the shelves to be reused again. It's one of the fastest things that you can recycle. And it doesn't have, instead of using all the natural resources to remake it. Okay. Glass, which I think is kind of cool about glass, they can actually power your computers for 30 minutes or 20 minutes, and glass never loses its clarity when it's recycled. It automatically gets, you know, it still keeps clear every time. So I thought that was kind of neat. And I'm buzzing through. Paper. The U.S. uses 15 the county uses so much every year, every day. The United States uses so much paper every day that they actually have 3.3 cubic yards of the landfill is completely paper, and it can actually do 15-mile train. So that's a lot. So we don't need it. Steel is the most recycled material, and it can be remelted and used again and again to produce steel products. For every steel recycled, 2,500 pounds of iron ore, 1,400 pounds of coal, and 120 pounds of limestone are conserved. The energy saved by recycling is enough to power about 18 million homes in a full year. Recycled steel saves nearly 74% of energy used to produce from raw materials. And then plastic bottles. A lot of plastic bottles, you can make things out of them again as well. And one of the interesting things that the kids like to know is the plastic tops on when you have a water bottle, they want you to leave them on because the bottles are so little that when they go on the conveyor belt to be recycled, sometimes they fall off, but the tops are recyclable, so they ask if you leave the tops on. Hazard house, we don't want to put this stuff sneak it in our garbage cans or anything else because then it can pollute the soils around it and go into our lagoons and everywhere else. And it's kind of neat that they can make fluorescent light bulbs and tubes and glues and adhesives and all kinds of things out of our materials. So it's all reusable. Electronics, I found interesting that they have precious metals in it, such as gold and silver and platinum, copper, tin, and zinc, so that it's really good to reuse them because we don't have to dig into our natural resources again. Plastic bags, they don't go into your recycle bins. However, you can take them to one of the major stores like Publix, Walmart, and they will recycle your plastic bags. They're not the 1 through 7 plastic. Auto parts, most of the auto parts in a car are reusable and recyclable. So make sure, and you can donate your cars to Keep Indian River Beautiful. Just call us, and then we'll send a tow truck out. They come and get it. We sell it at auction, and we can get rid of, doesn't matter if it works or not. So now we have an exciting part of my program, which is we worked with Keep America Beautiful, thank you, and we have a couple PSAs that we'd like to introduce that we're trying to get onto the TVs and the radio stations. So this is our TV PSA.
Everybody has a dream. Mine was to see the ocean. And with a little help, I made it. Isn't that exciting?
Good. Yeah, very good.
Yes. So then we also
when I grow up,
radio PSAs.
When I grow up, I want to be a new pair of blue jeans. When I grow up, I want to be a kid's first computer. A warm place on a cold day. I want to be a bike that races around the country. I want to be a bench on a forest trail. When I grow up, I don't want to be a piece of garbage. And if you recycle me, I won't be.
Give your garbage another life. Recycle. Learn how at iwanttoberecycled.org. Brought to you by Keep America Beautiful and the Ad Council.
So I have Donna Roberts from Clear Channel said she would do an in-kind donation and play that for me, so I'm very proud of that. And I'm offering it to anybody in the community if they want to use it for like they're putting their people on hold while they're waiting at their businesses or whatever. They can have that play. I'm welcoming it. I'd like to get the word out because I think recycling is important. We also have a billboard that I'm in the works with Waste Management and Republic Services, try and get the recycle trucks have a billboard like on them, wrapped saying, I want to be recycled, and it's kind of like an advertisement to show, just remind people what can be made from your recycled materials. So that's kind of what I have today. Any questions?
Very good.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Florey.
I got two.
Sure.
One is there's a good sixth reason for recycling, and that's the state of Florida has mandated that we recycle 75% of everything by 2020. And
That's right.
That's something the county is serious about. And I want to know, Fellsmere has single-stream recycling, and the county's now talking about it. Do you have any experience with single-stream recycling, and what do you think about it?
Personally, I would love single-stream recycling. I think it's a wonderful idea. at the mall, they used to have single-stream recycling. You could put everything in one bin, and it's nice because then you don't have to worry about separating it. If you're in your house, you have a garbage can, then you have a recycle bin. And because we're dual-stream, you have to have a garbage can, recycle bin, and a recycle bin because you have to separate everything. Or you could have one bin, so it would save a lot more. And it's easier, especially if you're like a business. You don't have to have a toter for paper, a toter for aluminum, a toter for your cardboard, and a toter for your garbage. You can have one bin for garbage, one bin for recycling. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher?
Yes. Earlier you mentioned something about styrofoam that we could not recycle, styrofoam that has color in it.
Right.
And so at that point, we do have a device that we can melt the styrofoam and force it into a very dense substance.
Right.
That could not be done with styrofoam that has color in it?
Yeah, styrofoams have different contractors do different types of recycling, and right now, currently, the contractor the county has only does the white styrofoam because it's harder. And then they make like boat docks out of it. They make playgrounds. I have some hard stuff here.
The reason why I raise it is in all of the schools, when the children receive their lunches, they are on black trays, and there are thousands of styrofoam trays being sent into the landfill each and every day. And
that was my that's how I learned about it, because on the tray it has, I think, a number 7 on the back and a triangle. So I went in and questioned, is this a plastic? And they said, no, styrofoam has the numbers as well. So that's how I learned that.
So a quick solution would be to purchase the white trays and then we could recycle?
Exactly.
I'm sure you suggested that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Next, we had added this. I just wanted to put a shout out that professional baseball returns to historic Dodgertown tonight. This will be a regular season game. The Brevard County Manatees are going to be the home team playing against the Lakeland Flying Tigers. And this is a game to commemorate Jackie Robinson when he first broke the race barrier in Major League Baseball. There will be some youth kids will be out there on the field. Former Major League Baseball Commissioner Fay Vincent will speak a few words. The play ball will start at 6:35, and then after the game there will be a fireworks display. So it's a great event. It is professional baseball back at historic Dodgertown. I see Helene Castleton in the crowd from the chamber. She's guaranteed good weather for the event, so that's taken care of. And tickets are only $5 a head, so it's back to the ballpark, and hope everybody can get out there and enjoy the game and get back out there to historic Dodgertown. So,
Mr. Chairman, which side are you going to sit on, the Flying Tiger side or the Manatee?
Our group usually likes to sit down there on the third base side.
Okay.
We'll be down along there somewhere, and looking forward to, we used to love bringing our kids out there for the baby Dodger games, and it's a great experience. For $5 a head, you can't do anything cheaper hardly in town than that. And it'll just be good to be at the ballpark and, hear the smack of that cowhide hitting the leather. It'll just be a good time. So hope everybody can get out there and watch the game. So
thank you.
All right. There's no minutes to approve. There's one informational item. Anything on that, gentlemen? Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Actually, under a separate informational item, just to recognize the passing of Warren Winchester, very active member of the community and in public service through the City Council and many other councils and commissions that he was on. And I believe his service is going to be, I think, the 26th.
26th, I believe.
26th. Right.
Thank you, Commissioner Zork, for bringing that up. Gentlemen, the consent agenda, I would like to pull item D.
D Delta.
And is there anything else wish to be pulled on the consent?
Did you say item B or D?
D as in David.
Okay, I'm fine.
Move as amended.
We have a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Is there anyone from the public that would like to have a consent agenda item pulled for further discussion? Anyone from the public to pull a consent agenda item? Okay, seeing none, on motion by Commissioner Flesher, second by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Item D is the resolution for a application to the Florida Inland Navigation District for the Head Island. This is the project the county approved, St. Christopher Harbor there, to remove some old fill that was placed years ago. And as part of the application, at the recommendation of fine, that we've added a boat landing dock for public access to the area, which I'm totally fine with. But if you look on page 29 of the backup, the map of the area, the proposed location is kind of on the west tip of the island, which really is right near where a lot of the shallow water seagrasses are. And part of the public benefit of this project was to protect the seagrasses. So I've asked staff, and they seem to be concurring, to move that closer over to the north side of the island, which would be adjacent to the deeper water moorings channel, and would still provide public access, but would hopefully keep boats going across that shallow water. So, Roland, anything to add to that? I mean, we talked about it yesterday, and staff is good with this?
No, we're good with that. It makes a lot of sense, and we're submitting it as a conceptual location, but certainly we will get with fine to make that adjustment.
Okay, good. So that's all I had. Anybody else want to comment on that?
No, very good.
If someone could make a motion,
Second.
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Flesher on the second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. There's no constitutional officer items, so that takes us to public items. The first is a public hearing. This is Grand Harbor Community Association, Inc. and GH Vero Beach Development, LLC's request for a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment to redesignate plus or minus 8.34 acres from CI to M1, and to rezone those plus or minus 8.34 acres from CG to RM6, and to simultaneously redesignate plus or minus 8.3 acres from M1 to CI, and to rezone those plus or minus 8.34 acres from RM6 to CG. There's a memorandum dated March 26, 2014. Gentlemen, this is a legislative and quasi-judicial matter, so we will go ahead and treat the entire process as a quasi-judicial. So with that, the parties to this proceeding are Indian River County and Grand Harbor Community Association, Inc. and GH Vero Beach Development, LLC. They will be collectively referenced to as the owners. As this is quasi-judicial, gentlemen, you at this point we need to disclose if there's been any ex parte communications, site visits, or independent investigations. Commissioner Flesher, we'll start to my right. Do you have anything to disclose?
No, sir. I didn't even speak to me about it.
Very good. Commissioner Davis?
No, sir. I didn't even notice when I drove past it on US 1.
Okay. I have nothing other than the fact this has been before us before when we submitted this as a transmittal hearing, but have not had any further communications or site visits or anything since that transmittal hearing. Commissioner Zork?
Same as Chairman O'Brien's, but nothing that would keep me from moving this forward today.
Thank you. Commissioner Slurry?
Same as Commissioner O'Brien's, and I'll just note I drive by the properties regularly, but not for the purpose of this matter.
Thank you. And then Commissioner Slurry, will come back to you that if you would confirm that you have an open mind and you're able to base your decision on the evidence presented and applicable law.
I do, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Zork?
I do.
I am open myself. Commissioner Davis?
I do.
And Commissioner Flesher?
I do.
Very good. Mr. Reingold, are we clear to open the public hearing at this point?
We are ready to go, sir.
Thank you, sir. We will open the public hearing. As this is quasi-judicial, anyone that wishes to speak during this public hearing does need to be sworn in by the clerk of the court. So if you are wishing to speak to this matter, please stand at this time and be sworn in.
Please raise your right hand.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. And at this point, we will have a presentation by county staff, and that would be Mr. Stan Bowling, the Community Development Director. And good morning and welcome, Stan.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have seen this request before. The comprehensive planning process that we have followed has been explained to you all before. The last comprehensive update we had to our plan was in 2010, but individual amendments are allowed in our 4 months out of the year. This particular request was submitted in October 2013. And this request has been through staff review, a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a transmittal hearing before you all. Since that transmittal hearing, this particular request was sent to reviewing agencies, and no objections have been received from those agencies. And this is now the final public hearing that you all are conducting this morning. And if this is approved, it will be moved forward and transmitted to the state and then eventually go into effect. Again, this has been reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you all have had no objections from any agency. The subject properties, two are involved with, in terms of swapping land use designations. The subject property 1 is located at the southeast corner of 53rd Street and Indian River Boulevard. The other is on the west side of Indian River Boulevard, south of Grand Harbor Boulevard, the same acreage, and essentially swapping the land use designations. The commercial industrial land use designation of subject property 2 will go to residential, which is shown here. The residential is shown in kind of the brown or tan color. And in the case of subject property 1 to the north, that designation would go from residential to commercial. So this is the before map here on the left and the after map on the right. Same with the zoning itself. An associated request will go through at the same time. The general commercial zoning on the south property would essentially go to the north property, and the multifamily zoning on the north property would go to the south property, as shown. The left-hand side is the before, and the right-hand side here is the after, if you all adopt the proposed amendment. Criteria were analyzed in a number of areas for this particular request, and all of the criteria were satisfied. Nothing's changed since the transmittal hearing where you all consider this last. Also, this particular request is exempt from concurrency since there is no density or intensity increase, and it's impacting the same facilities because the properties are beside each other. Essentially, subject property 1 will become an extension of a commercial industrial node that's on the west side of Indian River Boulevard right now. And for subject property 2, this particular area will become residential, and it's surrounded by a residential designated property already. Environmental impacts, staff looked at that, saw no issues with that before, and because this is a swap or reconfiguration of land uses, it is warranted and justified to go through the amendment process, and that's the case with this particular request. Staff's recommendation and the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission is that the board approve the future land use amendment and the rezoning requests, and I'd be glad to answer questions that you might have.
Thank you, Stan. Gentlemen, any questions of staff? Seeing none, are there any questions for staff by the owners? Okay.
No.
Oh, okay. Next would be a presentation by the owners. And Steve, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Commissioners. I do not have a formal presentation this morning. For the record, Steve Moeller, Masteller Moeller, representing the owners. Stan did a good job of explaining our application. This is the third time we've been in front of a county body, P&Z, and you twice, and so we look forward to your favorable action. And if there's any questions you have, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Steve. Gentlemen, any questions of the owners of Mr. Moeller? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Steve. Next, is there any input from the public? Does anyone from the public wish to speak about the proposed land use change or zoning changes? Yes, ma'am. Please come up to the podium. State your name and address for the record, please, and welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Mary Pagonis, and I live at Victoria Circle, which is just south of 53rd Street. And I'd like to know what effect will be on the houses nearby to change the property where the zoning is going to be changed.
Okay. Stan, can you call the map back up and maybe
certainly
locate where her
Right.
address might be?
This scenario, I believe Victoria Circle is this street here, and this you can see that there are residential units in Victoria Circle. To the west of that is almost 400 feet of open area that's owned by the applicant. So the commercial designation and zoning is approximately 400 feet away from the closest unit in Victoria Circle, so there will be intervening either open space or eventually residential use there. There will also be buffering, a significant buffer, if and when this property is developed commercial, that will be between the west boundary of the proposed commercial and then the 400 feet and then Victoria Circle itself.
Did you follow that, ma'am? Okay. So you have a 400-foot buffer of non-commercial land, could be developed as residential in the future, so it'd be just houses similar to yours. And then on the commercial property, on the eastern edge, closest to your address, the county does require a very significant buffer of vegetation and things like that as further buffering in addition to that 400 feet of the open space.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Please come up. Welcome. If we could have your name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Elsie Sanflavin. I also live in Victoria Circle. And my question is, what kind of commercial are we talking about?
Okay. Stan, could you please?
Certainly. The general commercial zoning district, it's the same type of district that's in the other areas up and down Indian River Boulevard and along 53rd Street. For instance, where you have, we tend to have retail and restaurants in that zoning district, shopping centers, or for smaller parcels like this one, retail shops and restaurants is what we tend to get in CG.
So there'll be a lot more traffic coming and going, and possibly traffic light at that corner, and possibly a lot of parking space needed in the commercial area.
Right.
Gas stations, is that a possibility, having a gas station put in there?
Yes, gas stations are allowed in the limited commercial and in the general commercial zoning district. This is going to general commercial. And in terms of traffic, when an individual development application comes in, a traffic study is performed by the applicant and reviewed by our Public Works Department. And at that time, they'll determine whether or not any signal improvements or turn lane improvements are required. Again, we do have buffering requirements, and we also have corridor requirements, which make sure that lights are shielded, dumpsters are enclosed and kept away from residential areas, that type of thing. If you or your neighbor are interested, if you can give me your contact information, we can contact you if and when a site plan application comes in, so you all can take a look at development plans whenever they're submitted.
It just seems a shame that a thoroughly residential area will suddenly become public land, commercial land. It just doesn't seem to fit with the environment.
Right. And I think in this particular location, because there is a significant separation to existing residential, and it is at a major intersection, that we believe that it's warranted.
Thank you very much for coming this morning. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak to the proposed land use change? Yes, sir. Welcome. Please come up and your name and address for the record.
John Whitpen. I also live in Victoria. Has the owner given you any indication of what they intend to do with the property, rather than having it so open-ended that anything can go there that's commercial?
Right. A couple of things. One is because it is a rezoning to a particular zoning category, even if the applicant had a proposal, we wouldn't really want that discussed because we cannot hold them to that. So what we really need to do is look at the general commercial zoning district and the uses that are allowed there and the protections that the county has in its development code, and determine whether that's appropriate or not. The applicant may be able to discuss what they intend to do, but again, they can't be held to any representations that they make.
So it is, if approved, it is open-ended for gas stations or anything else that might fit in there?
It will allow anything that's allowed in the general commercial district, which includes a gas station could be allowed, retail or restaurants, those types of uses could be allowed.
Because some of the residents in Grand Harbor were given the idea that what they wanted it for was a sales office. which would be consistent with the sales office that was on the other side of Indian River Boulevard at the time. And I think that kind of approval it wouldn't be objectionable to the residents, but open-ended could be.
And I would just comment that office uses, medical or general office, is allowed in the CG district, but again, it does allow more than just office uses.
And Stan, maybe too, if you could highlight some of the uses not allowed, like say a concrete plant or any heavy industrial thing is not allowed.
Right. No industrial uses, no warehousing type of uses are allowed in CG zoning district.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out this morning. Appreciate it. Is there any other further additional comment from the public? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Bob Johnson, Crowland Subdivision. One of the reasons people move to Indian River County is that we have very tight code restriction. The reason people move here is that they can be guaranteed that there's not a filling station going to be built next to their residential community. I've always thought that this is a weakness in our planning system, in that when we rezone, we don't hold the developer of the product of the development to a specific requirement before they build, instead of having it as the folks have said. So I just like to remind everybody that this is the reason we all move here, is because of some filling station not being next to our residential community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Stan, could you call back up the current status, please? So the current status there, since that is commercial general, could a gas station go right there?
Yes.
And actually, that looks to me like it's actually backed right up to some residential development just to the left there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then also, just catty corner from that is the main entrance into Grand Harbor. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, in my mind, you know, we're taking a potential, and I have no idea if there's a gas station or not. It was just brought up in discussion. But to me, it seems like that would be a worse location for a gas station. And by doing the swap, we've moved that a little further north and separated more from the residential. So if there were to be a gas station, it seems to me that the current land use is the unpreferred location, and the proposed one would be more preferred, just from my point of view. So, okay, thank you, Stan. Any other comments from the public? Any other comments from the public regarding the land use swap and the zoning change? Okay. Gentlemen, are there any further questions of staff or the owners, or any follow-up from the commission?
Just real quick, Stan, could you, the type buffer that would be required in the event that this, when they come in with a site plan, because it's a valid concern as far as the quality of life there, and just to help explain to me real quick for the benefit of everybody.
Sure. It's what's known as a 25-foot wide minimum type B, as in boy, buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature. What we tend to see with those is a 25-foot wide, heavily planted landscape strip, which has canopy trees, understory trees, and shrubs and hedges, and generally an earth berm to take out noise and lighting and so forth. And so it's a significant buffer, and it would be all along the west or the east boundary of the subject property between them and existing residences.
Okay. Thank you, Stan.
You Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Final presentations and arguments. Stan, any further to add?
No, sir.
Okay. Any further comments from the owners? Okay, seeing none. As far as I know, all documents and tangible evidence has been admitted into evidence and is in the hands of the clerk. And with that, we will close the public hearing then.
Oh.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Please come on back up. If you could name and address for the record, please.
Yes. My name is Ellen Gower. I live at 7435 Cypress Bend Manor in Vero Beach. I'm here to talk to you this morning about All Aboard Florida.
Oh, yeah, okay, ma'am.
I can't talk now? Do I talk?
No,
when that comes up?
you can absolutely talk to the commission, but now this is not the agenda item. You'll have a chance later.
Okay, fine. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
Commissioner Slaughter has an item under
I
his
know.
matters.
I didn't know whether the public could speak then.
Yeah, no, we're still on this land use change, but thank you very much for jumping up. Okay, so we've closed the public hearing. Commissioners, your pleasure.
Move staff recommendation.
And I'll second that, and I want to second that, in prefacing it with, as far as the residents of Grand Harbor's concerns, I really believe that, quite frankly, with the extension of Indian River Boulevard and as the plan development came forward of Grand Harbor, it makes more sense for this to be on 53rd Street as it comes through. The reason for that is when you have a community does need a commercial zoning to provide those services. Those need to be buffered from residential areas, and I think that as well as having fairly decent access to the infrastructure and the roads. And so, while I want you to know I did pay attention to what you're saying, and I understand the concerns, but I think those concerns will be addressed whenever something does come in there with the 100 yards of strip that you have in between the commercial and the residential, in addition to the corridor requirements of the as far as our landscape designs that will be put on the development. So I will be supporting this today.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. I think all of us would echo your words. Any further comments on the motion? Okay, seeing none. On motion by Commissioner Fletcher, second by Commissioner Davis, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. Again, thank you folks for coming out this morning. We appreciate your input. Next is a public hearing, consideration of an ordinance to amend the County Code, Chapter 308, Indian River County Housing Assistance Program. This memorandum is dated April 2nd, 2014. Again, Mr. Bowling, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county's local housing assistance program regulations were put into the county code. This is not a land development regulation. This is in the county code, Chapter 308, and that was adopted in 1993 when that program was getting started, but it has not been updated since. Planning staff and the county attorney have reviewed the chapter recently and identified some updates that are needed. Nothing is of substance, but we do feel that an update is needed. There are some terms and citations in Chapter 308 that need to be updated. There's also several sections that have state requirements verbatim in them, and because it's structured that way right now, whenever those state requirements change, when the state changes them, that language becomes out of date. So staff would like to delete the specific state requirements and simply refer to them, put in a reference in the ordinance. That way we'll stay up to date and people can just reference the state requirements through the statutes. There are also just a few updates to reflect some of the program changes, including committee composition. And staff and the county attorney have reviewed these, and we recommend that you all approve these changes. Be glad to answer questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. We'll open the hearing up. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak to these specific changes in the Chapter 308 ordinance? Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Althea McKenzie, 2405 16th Avenue. I have a question on reading this document or new ordinance. One was it's now being updated to include a revision for the Housing Advisory Council and NSP plan, which has been in effect since 2007. Why did we wait this late to include that is my first question. I would have thought if you're doing a new housing plan that you should make it part of your current ordinances. But one of the things that I had a question on is somewhere in here there's something called a second soft loan. Could somebody explain what that is?
Just a couple things, Mr. Chairman. First of all, it is certainly time to do an update. That's why we're doing it now. And the references to the mortgage, again, is an update to our program procedures right now to put that, clarify that by putting that in the code itself. So again, there are no changes to any of the program requirements or practices And again, we're taking this opportunity now to update the code. That's why we're before you this morning.
And then she had a question about a soft loan. Are you familiar with that in here? Or, Sasan, could you?
Yes. Sasan Rohani, Chief of Long Range Planning. Our loans, our SHIP loan, they are soft second loan. It means that when somebody wants to buy the home, we give them down payment, closing costs, and they do not need to make any monthly payment. They don't need to pay anything back till they sell their property. And that's why it's a soft second mortgage. And that is not changing. Everything is stay exactly as it is.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Ms. McKenzie?
What I'm reading is that there's a 30-year commitment on the loans and that there is a second soft loan that could be, and I could be wrong, that could be privately funded. According to the changes that you're making, there's a lot in this new housing assistance program. And here's what happens. It's not that staff doesn't do a good job, but you put so much in these things and you never present what the changes are. You never really explain to the public, okay, this is what it was and this is what it is now, this is what's better, this is what is improved. And so it's just a list of documents that have been crossed out. And I'm reading that you've developed a housing trust fund, one, and that there's now public-private interest. And there's, for me, a red flag or just a cautionary when I see things like second soft loans and private investors, because what happens in these housing programs is that they lose their purpose when you start bringing in investors and other commitments. People who are looking for affordable housing are not looking for additional challenges. And according to this document, you're opening it up for some private enterprise. And it just seems interesting that no information was really provided as far as comparisons as to what existed before and what you're correcting now. That was my only comment on that particular issue. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis?
Well, and I appreciate your words. Of course, this is why we're having this right now, and to have the public debate and to be able to answer those questions. And if we can't answer those questions, staff will be more than happy to. But as far as the private side of it, I don't quite agree with you necessarily on that. I really do believe that there are certain things that the private sector can do better. And to be able to have a profit motive built into this, to me, serves the client better, because if the client is not being serviced by the private sector and it's not a profit, there's not some level of profitability involved in it. I think that those are it keeps it from becoming a slum or anything that necessarily may adversely affect a community. So the private side of it, I want to go on record, doesn't necessarily scare me. I think there's a role for the private sector in the affordable housing side.
I understand that if you're looking for middle income projects, that the private sector can provide some additional funding and capital and put some things up to get the structures up. But what is happening is that some of these modules are not working. When you have a return in inventory on affordable homes, something is not working. When someone is not able to sustainably stay in the home, or the program does not allow for the person to stay in the home, that's the purpose of affordable housing. And Indian River County has adopted like a different process than everyone else. Most other people say, oh, well, why should someone live in the house for free? The goal is not for them to live in the house for free. However, if you're wealth building and doing sustainability, somebody who makes $8 an hour, if you put up additional barriers or a second loan or a second investor, will eventually fall into a pit. If you are making a sustainable contribution to a trust fund that helps them not fall into the pit, I could get that. But to have these second investors on these programs is not always viable for the person to be able to stay in the property. Yeah. And this is for lower income housing. So any of the programs that you have that have a return, they have a inventory of returned homes, should raise a question. what is not working or what is not sustainable. I like the trust fund, but it doesn't necessarily address sustainability and giving additional homes. It seems as if, from what I'm reading, that the person has to continually seek out additional finance opportunities. And what happens is you can get yourself into a pitfall if you're not able to have any type of wiggle room. And if our percentages are based on 30%, then we need to design programs that help to have that 30%, because unless somebody has expendable income, they never grow out of poverty. They stay in that set, that 50% and below, going towards housing. When I saw second soft loan, it kind of raised a question on this side, because I've seen some modules where we use the grant funds, but there's some silent investors. Something is not ringing true on what's being presented, and so that was my concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the public on the public hearing? Dylan?
I just want to clarify something. I think the language that the speaker talked about, which was the deferred payment soft second loans, this actually isn't a phrase that's being changed in this ordinance. That's actually language that's in our ordinance today, and staff did not modify. So there's no new program or adjusted program. It's still the same language that's been in our code. I just want to make sure that was clarified.
Thank you. Any further comments by the public? We'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Gentlemen?
Move staff recommendation. Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slaughter, second by Commissioner Davis, to approve staff recommendation. All in favor of the motion signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen. Under public discussion items, earlier Mr. Bill Rigby had requested his to be pulled and tabled to another meeting. We did add City of Sebastian Council Member Richard Gilmore. Mr. Gilmore, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Chairman O'Brien, Commissioners. Richard Gilmore, City of Sebastian. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I come to you today with a request. The City Council this last week couldn't help but notice the Commission's request to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to change the name of a document that is now noticed as 750 to, I guess it would be 550, 450. Not sure what 50 would be. But
we're down to 3.550.
Down to 3. Well, this would, we believe, misinform the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, asserting, I think, that no one in Indian River County wants to be part of this planning process. And when, in fact, the two largest cities, Sebastian and Fellsmere, are not pulled out of this program. Now, Sebastian is the largest city population-wise with over 23,000 people. And Fellsmere, I believe, is the largest in area as far as the city goes. It's humongous. And we believe that planning is an important part of the future. There's an old saying that says that if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu. And I think that that holds true with planning. If you're not sitting at the table, if you're not discussing future funds, then chances are you're probably not going to get any. The 7 counties that make up the Southeast Florida region contain currently over 6 million people. And when you look at that region, my goodness, there are only 18 states in the United States of America that have more population than this region. Think of that. 33 states in America have 6 million or fewer people in them. So it's a region that we really need to look at and plan for. The South Florida Water Management District makes up pretty much this whole area. In fact, the South Florida Water Management District comes all the way up to the division of St. Lucie and Indian River County. I would say that each of you all sit on the Metropolitan Planning Organization, That organization plans for future transportation needs, and in fact, they have a plan. You all have a plan that goes out to 2065. And so if it's important to plan for transportation needs, please reconsider your request of the Treasure Coast Planning Council in light of those areas of the county, like Fellsmere and Sebastian, who want to stay involved. And entities like Indian River State College, the Indian River County Chamber of Commerce, Indian River EDC, Indian River Citrus League, please consider pulling this item from Friday's meeting of the Treasure Coast Planning Organization. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilmore. Any questions of Mr. Gilmore or comments?
I'll just make some comments, and I'll keep these short at this point. But this discussion item for Friday has nothing to do with being against planning. It has nothing to do with being against discussion of future funds. I'll note that you talk about a plan. The 750 plan was initially set to be a business plan or prosperity plan, which without discussion they changed to a research tool. And they had no problems changing the name from Sustainable Communities something to 750 during the process. So the name of the plan isn't material to what's been done. So there's no reason not to have the discussion that we hope to have at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and we should have that discussion. And I'll also point out that this was nothing new. This came before this council over 3 months ago, and the only reason it's on the agenda this Friday is because without any notice to Indian River County, they decided to discuss it first at the executive committee of the 750 group with no notification to Indian River County, no courtesy of a notification, and at the executive committee group they evidently said, no, we don't need to go any further. So one of the problems is time and time again there hasn't been full, hearty discussion about what's going on, and that's the point of hopefully Friday's discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you have a comment, Commissioner?
Well, I was going to say, on the MPO does have its traffic plan and its planning projections going forward, but it's the plan that we see and what we want and where we want to see things move as it relates to our comprehensive plan and our urban service area boundary. And it's kind of the plan of our choice, not the plan we might potentially inherit as being part of a 750 plan.
And at the MPO, that we make those decisions collectively with all the municipalities, and I don't believe it includes all of those individuals that we talk about that makes our population comparative to large congested states. This is a congested region, but most of that congestion is way south, and we work hard to ensure the complexities of this community is addressed appropriately, and that the appearances and the quality of life are also considered at the MPO, at the local level, by your council, by this commission, to ensure that the citizens are afforded the quality of life. In addition, I believe I heard at a city council meeting that the attorney made comment that that the city was not involved with the process any longer. And in hearing that, and I understand that there's benefit with the 750. There's some monetary gain with strings attached, and that has been the biggest issue that we have discussed. And I thought I did hear from the attorney that the city of Sebastian was not involved with the process and had no agreement with the 750. That sounds like there's no understanding, and it does appear to be that if there's a benefit, we may accept it. I don't know if that's the case with the city of Fellsmere. There has not been that broad-based discussion on it, but I just wanted to remind you what I heard during that council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And just, Commissioner, I would point out that at the MPO, when we discussed our long-range transportation plan, the unelected bureaucrats at DOT required us to collaborate regionally with Martin and St. Lucie County And even you supported wrapping Brevard County in that. So
Absolutely.
we have expanded it. It's not just standing alone. It is recognizing the need. We need to collaborate on a regional level. And as far as money with strings attached, every single grant we get has strings attached. There is no such thing as free money with no strings attached. The HUD contracts that we have voted for and approved have tremendous strings attached. And if we don't expend those funds as those strings outline, we are subject to legal action against us. So every single grant we apply for and accept has strings attached to it. So that shouldn't be a factor one way or the other. When we put out a grant, we have strings attached to it. So, you know, that's just part of the deal. When you have the money, you get to dictate how it's spent. And so there's always strings attached coming or going. So.
And we examine them carefully, and some of the windings on those strings can be unraveled rather quickly, and that's when we determine whether we want to go forward with that grant or not. But as far as the 750...
Nothing has changed under the 750. You still have to apply for the money. And you can make the decision if you like the strings with it or not. It's a voluntary application. Nothing's changed. Yes, ma'am. Did you wish to speak to this? Yes, we're not quite at All Aboard Florida yet.
No, this is not it. No, I just wanted to comment to the gentleman who spoke and to follow up on what Joe Fletcher said. My name is Ellen Gower, 735 Cypress Bend Manor. I belong to the American Coalition for Property Rights, and we were attending that Sebastian City Council meeting when they shut us down. We were trying to convince them to make a motion and write a letter to the 750 people to please opt out of 750, and they said they were not in it. Now, as far as we knew, after the Memorandum of Understanding period was over, which was February 22nd of this year, everybody had signed a consortium agreement much earlier that started on that date and went indefinitely. Sebastian told us that they had not signed any such contract. We could not believe that. We went to the Sebastian city clerk, if that's the proper title, and asked what documents they had relating to 750 that the city council had signed on to. And the city clerk said, the only one I see is the Memorandum of Understanding. We asked if she would please send us everything she had about Sebastian and 750. She did that. There was no consortium agreement. So Sebastian's city council was correct when they said they'd never signed on, and what they did sign on to expired on February 22nd. So I just wanted to add that to the record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Reingold, if you would do the honors of the scheduled public notice items, please.
To the chair and to the full board and to those in the audience and those watching at home. Public notice items, the notice of scheduled public hearing. This is a hearing that will be scheduled for April 22nd, 2014. Public notice of public hearing to consider adoption of a proposed ordinance amending the Indian River County Code with respect to nuisance abatement. Memorandum dated April 8, 2014. And with that is our only notice of public items, and I will now turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Dylan. No county administrator matters. We move on to departmental matters. Community development. Request to approve an amended Neighborhood Stabilization Program 1, NSP 1. Community Development Block Grant Administration Contract with Fred Fox Enterprises, Incorporated. This memorandum is dated April 3rd, 2014. Again, good morning, Mr. Bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 2009, the county applied for and was awarded a Neighborhood Stabilization Program grant, NSP, now known as NSP 1, and that came through the State Department of Economic Opportunity. That's to purchase and rehabilitate foreclosed properties and then to sell or rent those properties to very low, and moderate income families. The original grant amount was $4,680,000. And during that time, the county entered into a contract with Fred Fox Enterprises for $200,000 to perform grant administration services and that program, of course, started in 2009. It's soon to close out in the next few months, and that will be the end of NSP 1 after closeout. At the time of the contract, that we entered into the contract with Fred Fox Enterprises, the DEO said that program income funds could not be used by the county. They'd be returned to DEO. After that, the DEO changed its position partway into the program and said that the funds can be used, and so the county has used the program and income funds. And at this point, staff knows that will be $1,695,000. So the original contract was for services that involved administering the program at $4,680,000. It'll actually come out to be as $6,376,000. So additional housing units were able to be acquired and rehabbed and put through the program, actually 12 additional homes, totaling 45 housing units for the total program. Now that we're approaching the closeout, staff estimates that we'll have $35,000 remaining in the funds, and that's not enough to acquire or rehab another housing unit. And anything remaining at closeout has to be returned to DEO. And so the county essentially is at a decision point right now to continue to operate under the existing contract and then return what we believe will be up to $35,000 to DEO, or amend the contract with Fred Fox Enterprises to recognize the significant additional services provided, the contract going from the current $200,000 to up to $235,000. Now, as we stated in the agenda item, the board's under no obligation to amend the contract. During the process when these additional funds came in and more work was generated, that additional work was acknowledged and no promises or guarantees were made. And normally we would get additional value. It was a good thing to get from consultant services, but in this case it was a 36% increase in funding, and of course there was additional work associated with that. Staff has drafted a contract amendment presenting to you for your consideration this morning, and our recommendation is that you approve the amended contract. Also wanted to point out that Fred Fox is here if you have questions about work performed, and that's our recommendation.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions of staff? Commissioner Solari?
I've got some. When I read the backup, there was one line in the staff backup that triggered something, and that was that the $35,000 amount is not sufficient to purchase and rehab another housing unit. And then there was this request for the $35,000 for Mr. Fox, which seemed to me that maybe, well, because there's $35,000 left over, we'll give it to Mr. Fox. And I had also remembered, I think, that at one of the NSP hearings, after the first tranche of money was used, that Mr. Keating said that from this point forward, the staff is going to do the work. So I wasn't understanding that there was an ongoing commitment to Mr. Fox. I asked for backup, and the backup shows an exact number of hours at different levels from Mr. Fox's firms, which equals an exact plug to the $35,000, which is always somewhat problematic. I also asked if there had been any interim requests of staff for the additional work done by Mr. Fox, and quoting from Stan's email, there was no interim request regarding the additional work performed, only discussions with staff. There was an acknowledgement that additional work was being performed and that no additional compensation was promised or guaranteed. So, again, it just strikes me that it's just too much of a plug of funds left over. I, at this point, don't doubt that Mr. Fox did some other work, but the work that he's done is going to be compensated at $127 an hour. I could agree to some split of the $35,000, but at this point, just given the way everything is, I'm not going to agree to give the full $35,000 to Mr. Fox.
Good morning, Mr. Fox.
Good morning. Just for clarification, two things. One is that the items I performed on the original grant were also performed by our firm on the program income projects. So there was none of that work that was shifted over to your staff. We continue to do that. We did request the additional funding When it became clear that there was going to be a significant amount of program income money, Mr. Keaton at that time deferred, wanted to make sure that there was money to do as many houses as possible. And as far as backing into the grant amount, that form is a form required by DEO, and it must equal the amount of the amendment. So that's the reason the two match. We actually did the hourly form after we had a firm number and backed into it.
Okay, when you discussed it with Mr. Keating, did you put anything in writing?
Yes, we did a request. It was an email to Mr. Keaton.
Okay, well, I had made a request for that. I didn't see it, so I would definitely want to see it before I voted for the $35,000.
And it was a couple of years ago, and it was for a request basically at the same percentage that we were getting on the original dollars. And at that point, he deferred, and there was no more negotiation at that point.
If we'd like to table it to try to find that email and some idea of a commitment from the county for this, that'd be fine. But at this point, just based on what I know and what's before me today, I couldn't vote for the full $35,000.
Gentlemen, we can either move forward or table this. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. I'll second that motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that motion carries 4-1 with Commissioner Solari opposed.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Office of Budget Management, online auction analysis, memorandum dated April 9, 2014. And here we go. Good morning.
This was pulled. We had this on last week. It was pulled because there was some concern by the commission about us getting involved in something the public sector could do. We've talked to the auctioneer that we use under contract, and he was actually the one that encouraged us to do this online because he says he doesn't make any money off of this. Basically, he has to advertise, and these are miscellaneous small items. And the other thing about this is the other municipalities, the school board, and all of the governments have gone to that for this stuff. And so we still think it's a good idea to continue because he just says he loses money. He doesn't want, to add it.
Good morning, Ms. Hyde. How are you?
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Hyde, Purchasing Manager. We brought back just a little additional information on why we feel that online auction is going to be a better benefit to the county. First of all, because of the goods that we have to get rid of have generally exceeded their life expectancy. We don't have auctions more than once a year, so we have a lot of items that sit idle for many months, and during that time, if they were working when they were surplus, they may no longer be when it comes time for sale. So there's a significant loss of value in the items, we feel. So if we had the ability to sell things as we're done using them, that's going to bring us a better value. Online auctions tend to reach a broader audience. Our live auctions reach pretty much regional folks, whereas the online auctions reach out nationwide. There's more sellers than just our local municipalities, so there's a bigger draw of buyers and sellers. So again, think that's going to increase our value. And in terms of value overall, we feel like we're not going to lose any value in what we're selling. We expect that we'll bring in more money by selling this way. Finally, we feel like it's a more efficient use of our staff. Right now, when we're doing a live auction, we move things at least once, oftentimes twice, first to get them out of the way and second to get them to the live auction site. With the case of an online auction, buyers come buy them directly from where we have items stored, so that could alleviate a lot of the moving things around and the risk of things getting broken. There's no commitment for us if we do try online auction. We can, if we determine it doesn't work for us, we can stop. We can go back to live auctions as we feel is both most beneficial to the county. Currently, the sheriff's recently decided to hold a live auction at the end of May. So right now we're proposing to get rid of all of our current surplus items at that live auction. But right now, today, we're asking for your permission to authorize the public surplus agreement that we presented last week and allow us to enroll with them as a seller and also with GovDeals, who doesn't have any kind of agreement that we're required to sign. But we want to enroll as a seller with both of those, so after the auction at the end of May, we're able to start using online auction and see how that does work for us going forward. And that's all I have at happy to answer any questions.
I still see vehicles on the surplus list here with that being attached. I thought we were going to change that.
That list that is attached are items that we will sell for the live auction. We just brought that list back because Jason wanted to show how long we've had those items and what their value is on the books right now, which is 0. So we just kind of wanted to show how long we use things before we do try to get rid of them.
So it's just a surplus list, not a surplus
Yeah,
list.
those items, if you do approve for surplus, those will be held for the live auction on the 31st of May.
All right.
In the backup, staff has presented 5 alternates. The first one is to approve that excess equipment list. Alternate 2 is to authorize staff to dispose of all equipment and vehicles by online auction. Alternate 3 is to authorize use of online auction to dispose of equipment excluding vehicles. And staff recommendation is 1 and 2. I'm all for using the online thing to get rid of all these smaller items that are really a pain. But I think Commissioner Davis had some good points last week about the titling process and clearing that out. So my preference, I think, would be alternate 1 and then alternate 3, where all the other excess equipment, I'm fine going online, but I think vehicles, I would still like to see a manual transaction where somebody has to sign something and we make sure that title is cleared. And the only change I would recommend there is instead of saying vehicles, I would just say any item that has a title. And I don't know if a grader has a title or not, or if we call it a vehicle, but I just think if we just say anything with a title, we do not do online. Would be my.
That's you're probably better off. I understand what you're saying, but you're probably better off leaving the vehicles, things with a motor in there. And what typically happens, you do have a synergistic effect of there's you're going to have somebody there to buy the grader, which is typically your higher end item, and only one person can buy them. Then that frees up $15,000 to buy a police car, or several of them, if you understand what I'm saying. So you start taking those things away from it. The vehicles, I would certainly call a tractor a vehicle. So I would kind of leave that. I encourage what you're talking about, but leaving it not just a title, just like they have it in number 3.
Okay.
I'll move.
You're kind of the more.
I'll move 1 and 3.
Expert, familiar. So.
Commissioner O'Brien, if I may, I've spoken with like the City of Vero, City of Sebastian, the school district. Kind of asked them about how they've handled titles, vehicle titles. A couple of them handle it different ways. One is have the seller sign the title when we sign it over to them. That way we have their proof that they've signed it. Another is the Department of Motor Vehicles actually has a 1-page form that we can fill out with the VIN number, and we write who we've sold it to, what the date is, and we drop that off here at the tax collector's office, and that alleviates us from our understanding of any accountability. And it's a 1-page form. It's simple, and I think that's something we can handle in-house.
And the first part about what she's talking about, just because it's signed, still is an open title. It's that actual transfer, but that affidavit she's talking about is currently service has been provided by the auctioneer, and that's why, as far as pulling more staff in or having it as part of something else, I'll stick with 1 and 3.
Okay.
So seconded.
And again, Jennifer, I appreciate you bringing all this forward to us, and let's try this for a year, see how it cycles. You can always bring it back to us if we find we don't have it quite right, but I think that I'm comfortable with this step right now. So we have a motion from Commissioner Davis, seconded by Commissioner Flesher, which is to approve the staff presentation of alternate 1 and alternate 3, which allows for disposal of excess equipment online, excluding vehicles, is the word we're sticking with.
Right.
Okay? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here, and Chris will actually. Can we go get Chris done, and then we'll take a break? Yeah. Okay. We'll go ahead and proceed with Public Works. This item 1 is professional roof design and evaluating consulting services, RFQ number 2013049. Memorandum dated April 1st, 2014. Good morning, Mr. Mora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Chris Moore, Public Works Director. What you have before you on page 207 of your backup of your package is a professional roof design and evaluation consulting service, RFQ. We sent this request for qualifications out last June. The reason we sent it out is that periodically
we need to have roof remediation or replacement services done for the county. We have 46 different facilities that the Facilities Management Division manages. It's over 550,000 square feet of enclosed space, and because of the variety of roofs and buildings and ages of roofs that we have, we need these services periodically. We advertised the RFQ. We got 13 submittals. We whittled it down to 5. We interviewed 5, and we're recommending actually 2 companies. They're shown at the bottom of page 207, J. Ammon Architect, Inc., and REI Engineers, Inc. And we're requesting a recommendation is that we move forward with these 2 contracts, which are attached, and that you authorize the chairman to sign them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of staff?
Move staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Slurry, second from Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? Any comment from the public? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries 5-0. And with that, we'll take a 10-minute break and come back at 10:45. call the meeting back to order. We'll now proceed with the county attorney matters, and that is the Public Education Facilities Impact Fee Interlocal Agreement, memorandum dated April 9, 2014, and Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much to the chair. At the last board meeting, the Board of County Commissioners had asked the county attorney's office to examine the relationship between the school board and the county with respect to impact fee collection. And based upon that request, the county attorney's office had examined the interlocal agreement between the school board and the county. And essentially under the interlocal agreement, the county takes in money when it accepts building permit applications, and it holds that money in a separate segregated account. On the 20th day of the month, the county then forwards all that money over to the school board. At that same time, the county prepares a report, and under that report, we document the permits that have been pulled, the monies that have been collected, and if there have any been refund requests. At that point, the responsibility generally shifts to the school board. They have to maintain the money in a segregated interest-bearing account, and then they're responsible for expending the money. Now, the county still has the responsibility of processing and reviewing refund accounts. This is a very similar relationship that we have with the school board that the cities have with the county. Now, there's one difference, however, that I think it's important to note. Annually, the school board sends to the county its 5-year facility plan. It also explains to the county what projects it will be intending to spend impact fee monies on. The county then opines as to whether that expenditure and the plan meet or are consistent with, 1, the impact fee ordinance, and 2, just general applicable law. It's a little bit more involvement with the county in that process than the cities are with our agreement with them. However, I did notice, and I did note in my memo, there is a pretty strong indemnification clause in our agreement with the school board. Essentially, they're responsible for defending the county, holding harmless the county, and indemnifying the county with respect to the collection, the assessment, the expenditure, the calculation of impact fee dollars in relationship to public educational facilities. And the county is only liable, is not liable unless it's the county's sole negligence, or that we were willful, reckless, or the county had illegal conduct in processing this. So with that regards, I thought that was some pretty strong indemnification language. Finally, I just would like to note that Commissioner Zork brought up a case last meeting with regards to, I think it was Midland, Florida, or Mid-Florida, and the Osceola County case. And in that case, it did deal with school impact fees, and Osceola County was the only defendant. In that case, I think it's important to note that the court did uphold the impact fee generally for Osceola County. However, they did note that certificates of participation payments for past additional capacity projects, there should have been a credit for those. So thus, there was a slight decrease from the original impact fee that was established to offset the credit that should have been granted. But otherwise, the impact fee adopted by Osceola County was legal. It's important to note that in some of the research that our consultants did this week, that they were able to dive in and figure out that actually what happened was that the district paid for that discrepancy, and it wasn't on the county's dime. So I thought that was important to bring back to the commission. Other than that, this is just an informational item. This board asked me to research it, and I hope I've answered your questions. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Dylan. Commissioners, any question of staff at this point in time?
I do have one for Stan that I briefly touched on with him before the meeting this morning, and as he's coming up, is I know we have, for all the other fees, what I call benefit districts, where for traffic, if the money's collected in District 1, 2, or 3, the money's allocated to be spent there. And I use the example of if a family builds a home in the South County in the Vero Beach Highlands and pays their fee, and then the district spends all that money to benefit Fellsmere, where their student would never be assigned to go to school, how does that work out from the consultant's perspective? If there's improvements that are needed in the South County area and they go, well, we don't have the money, now we have to raise taxes to expand a school or provide capacity, and the residents of that area, money was spent still in the district because it's countywide, but was spent to where their students would never attend school. And maybe you can just kind of touch on the conversation we had.
Right. Just that the school impact fees are set up for a countywide district for the school board, and you're correct that fees are looked at district-wide, they're spent district-wide. The needs can be more local with school attendance zones. There are out-of-zone attendance that does happen in different places, or people can choose perhaps to go to magnet schools, for instance. So there's not a direct correlation entirely with where someone lives and where they go to school, but generally it is. But again, it is district-wide, it's collected district-wide, but the use and the need for a school in a particular part of the county is something that the school board addresses in their planning, and the Department of Education has to actually approve. So it may be collected in one portion of the county and used in another portion of the county for one type of improvement. Years later, it could reverse and be the other case.
Okay, thanks. Also, one other one that we didn't touch on was when you have charters which are public schools but managed separately from the district, and they now comprise about 15%, roughly 15% of the district money, but there does not seem to be any shift of capital money that's collected through impact fees that is then shared percentagely or some proportionate formula back. And I don't know if we can look at, I don't know if that's considered micromanaging, but they provide a significant portion of the district's seat capacity or student station capacity, and I know there's an underlying separate issue of the sharing of the local property tax capital money, that very little of that is shared, that the district spends most of it, even though charters are representing up to 15% of the student stations now. Is that something we could at least get the consultant's opinion on, or is that meddling in school board law? The speaker we had at last week's meeting talked about that the district shares equally all that money with the charters, and that I just want to say that's not, in talking with representatives from some of the charter schools, they say that they get very little, if any, capital money from the schools compared to what percentage that they represent of the district's budget.
Let me just say I'm not an expert in meddling determinations. I'll leave that to other folks. But I will say that what we intend to do with our next public workshop is to have the full consultant team here, including their attorney, and to have school board staff here, because school impact fees will be one of the main topics at the next public hearing, as well as the rest of the residential impact fees and implementation issues. And so I think that's probably the appropriate time to ask all the questions, because all the parties that are involved will be represented.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. That good? Mm-hmm. Any other questions of staff? Okay. Any comments from the public? Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. About a year ago, I came before this board to present a study that showed that indicated to at least to us that the level of service in certain areas had been exceeded, and I questioned whether the continued collection of impact fees was either warranted and perhaps even legal. Since that time, we're coming up on a year now since that's happened, we've talked about it a lot. We've had a couple of workshops. We're going to have some more. And it appears that at least some of them, the staff is now recommending a different way of different methodology, and they're also recommending some elimination or reduction in some of the areas that were pointed out as concerns that we had about a year ago, and I'm very grateful. Unfortunately, when the consultant was here last time, because of whatever the schedule difficulties were, there was no information presented by the school board. So last week I came before you and asked two questions. Number one was, will the county commission hold the school board to show just cause as to why they should be able to continue to collect impact fees? And from what I understand from the staff and from commissioners, you are going to be doing that, both at the workshop and you've probably done some of the information. I saw a staff memo over the last week that identified that they had in fact collected about $11 million. The staff memo identified some of the additional student stations, which is the yardstick that the impact fee uses, that were made by the expenditure of that $11 million. It didn't address the other part of that, and that is the elimination of 2 schools and a large number of people who are now in charter schools. But it seems like the question number one that I asked is being addressed appropriately, and I thank this commission for doing so. However, the second issue was number two, was if the county needed to do any due diligence to make sure that it was legal to actually collect when under certain circumstances. The staff memo and the memo just presented by Mr. Reingold does address what happens to the school money once the school district gets it and once the county gets it. It does not address the central issue, which is whether the schools will be able to continue or not to collect those impact fees based upon the circumstances of today versus the circumstances of 2005. One of the main questions, and Commissioner Davis brought up, was jurisdiction. What was the jurisdiction of the county to be able to question this information? The interlocal agreement addresses the issue of jurisdiction quite often in its pages, but no more than under its whereas, the fifth whereas on page 242 of your backup, where the whereas says the county has prepared a public education facilities impact fee calculation methodology, and jumping forward, that public education facility impact fees comply with applicable legal principles, including but not limited to the proportionate share rational nexus standard as required by impact fee case law. And that is the central question. Does a continuation of collection of impact fees by the school district when no discernible growth or small growth is expected? It is also addressed in the interlocal agreement on page 245 under responsibilities, number E5. It is the county's responsibility to provide any other information deemed relevant to the county's determination of the proposed expenditures compliance with the ordinance and applicable law. Now, applicable law is defined on page...
Mr. Wilson, just a quick clarification there. What you just read, E5,
yes, sir,
is Section 5, which is responsibilities of the school board.
Okay. I'm sorry, I could be on the wrong page. Thank you very much. Page 247, under governing law, the agreement and its interpretation and performance shall be governed and construed by the applicable laws of the state of Florida. Now, the reason I mention this is to point out that the overwhelming law here that you have a responsibility for, that you have jurisdiction given to you, is the state statute. It is not the ordinance. It is the state statute. So the requirement both in the interlocal agreement and in the state statute is that the county commission is the only body who may institute an impact fee. So the question then returns to what can we do for due diligence to find out whether what we're doing is legal or not. And that is obviously completely up to you folks. The only other way of doing it is a circuit court. The city of Stewart just went to circuit court to give a declaratory judgment ahead of time to see if they were doing the right thing when they imposed another fee. So all I'm really asking again is thank you very much for all the information that was created, and thank you for Mr. Reingold answering part of the question, but the central question has not been addressed as what is left out, and that is, does the county have the legal right under the dual rational nexus test to continue to collect impact fees when a diminished need exists? And that is the question that is unanswered.
We'll have our consultant look at that, and he'll bring that all back. Also, you're making some predetermined decisions. You're saying that the school board, they have not come with what they're going to do as far as impact fees. They might say they're not going to collect them. We don't know at this time. So that has not been determined, and that's what the workshop's about. Also, I'd like to clarify another thing. Cities can impose impact fees, and the county can't say anything. They also have the ability, as you well know, Sebastian has one. So you said that the other governments can't. They can't.
I'm sorry, you're right. I was referring to the school board. The school board cannot do it independently, and thank you for correcting me. So I'd be glad to work at the workshop with the consultants. I think it's a small problem in that, don't you have scheduled at the end of April a vote to approve the new methodology before the workshop that the school board is going to take part in?
For the commercial? I think we're moving that.
Yeah, and I'll take full responsibility because we thought we could give some projects that needed to get the reduction. We moved ahead when the school board couldn't move that quickly, and I said that it would be in the best interest of our community to help our commercial people expand with reduced impact fees. And that was a decision I made, and I stand behind.
You know, Mr. Wilson, if you don't mind, and I'm not trying to put you to work on it, but if you really do want to know the questions to those, could you either email the chairman or myself specifically what you're asking, and then that way we'll go ahead and send them to the consultant, if that's all right with everybody, because I mean, you know more about the impact fees probably than the average bear. Sometimes what your opinion is differing than the administration. Just imagine that. But there's nothing that, I don't think anybody up here doesn't want to know the answer to or try to hide. And if the more of these we can knock out prior to the quite frankly, even the workshop, it'll give me an opportunity to hear what you have to say, hear what our consultant has to say, and then take it back to our attorney and hear what his opinion of it is.
Thank you for asking that, Commissioner, and I certainly will. I've been bothering them, enough, and when I come here for my weekly meetings, I would just as soon get it out of the way, by email and get my question. And they have certainly clarified some things now. And if in fact the school board is coming back and saying, no, we're not going to continue to collect either a full amount or a partial amount, if they've made that change, then that's exactly what I was trying to do a year ago. I brought it up before this commission that in fact the impact fees, continuing to collect them, was problematic because many of the levels of service had been exceeded, and you reacted. So it's taken a year of going through this. We'll learn more and more back and forth. But if I have been successful in bringing this issue up, and if the school board decides to give a break to people in Indian River County by following the laws of rational nexus, then I've succeeded, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Or if they come up with a reason, and everybody says, okay, yes, now we understand the rationale, they'll keep charging them, and then at least you'll have an answer.
If they come up with that kind of rationalization, then absolutely, and I will. I'm not against impact fees. I'm just against impact fees improperly spent and assessed.
True.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to clarify one thing. Mr. Wilson referred under governing law that he thought the laws of Florida somehow trump our interlocal agreement. And just in that section 10, it's very specific that it is, this agreement shall be governed and construed by the applicable laws of the state of Florida. So this interlocal agreement is legal. It is governed by the laws of Florida, but I think it certainly upholds it, and that we can follow this as a legal document under the laws of Florida, because it's very specific to this agreement shall be governed by the laws of Florida.
This agreement and its interpretation and performance shall be governed and construed by the applicable laws of the state of Florida.
Right.
So I don't think that nothing trumps this agreement. It just says
if it is not legal in the state, if this ordinance, if this interlocal agreement does not meet state law or constitutional law, it is not valid.
Right.
That's what it says.
Right.
But I believe it does. So it's a valid interlocal agreement.
Well, that's what we're asking, is whether it meets state law, state statutes, and the Constitution. Because you have the power and you have the authority to assess all kinds of things, but you do not have the power or authority to assess something that is denied by the state constitution. As an example, you cannot do a poll tax. So if the state constitution does not allow this commission, no matter how powerful this commission is, it does not allow you to impose a tax on a business. It allows you through judicial review to assess a fee. And the difference between a fee and a tax is whether it meets the dual rational nexus. So if it doesn't meet the dual rational nexus, it is not a fee, it is a tax, and it is illegal. Thank you.
Gentlemen, this was just presented for information, I take it, so there's no action here?
Correct.
Just got some.
That takes us to commissioner items, and Commissioner Davis, you had an item added. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, mine's fairly simple, and I'll kind of get staff's...
I have a question on something, on your interlocal thing.
All right, Ms. McKenzie?
According, Althea McKenzie, I was trying to read this interlocal agreement, and maybe Mr. Reingold can answer this. Am I reading it correctly that it was instituted in 2005 and was going to expire in 5 years? Or were they going to be accountable to you in the 5-year capital improvement plan?
The 5-year program is a document they send us every year that we review.
Okay, so has that been done since the 2005?
To the best of my knowledge, they've sent us our 5-year annual expenditure list and their capital improvement program.
And you are to approve that?
No, we just look at it.
You look at it?
Yeah,
so
it's a courtesy.
The reason that I'm asking is where's the point of accountability? If you're sending funds over and they haven't gotten back to you on specifically how they've used it or plan to use it, shouldn't in 2010 that kind of should have been an inquiry?
Let me help you with this, Althea, as I understand it anyhow. Yeah. What we used to do on the school board is we would do the 5-year capital improvement plan, and basically that helped us budget and prioritize where the funds used to be or needed to be. We use that not as an authority over the school board, but more as a planning tool to keep it kind of to where we're all on the same page as far as, okay, our planning department knows where we have residential units going in, and therefore, we say, okay, kind of like the South County Initiative, it had school sites, and all that kind of plays in together. So it's more of a cooperation between the two boards, not one necessarily to hold the other one accountable for where they do and don't spend funds.
Okay, and the reason for my question is sitting on the parent advisory board, there was in 2012, Superintendent Adams had paid off some schools, and there was some money that would have gone back to the taxpayers as far as them not having to pay those school board taxes because those schools had been paid off. And it was put on the ballot that they needed additional funds for capital improvements. And it was sent to the public to ask to keep that 6%, whatever, back on the rolls under the auspices that we were going to do school improvements, including computer and technology. So I think some of this accountability and questions, and I don't know what your workshop is going to involve, but there's a lot of questions that need to be raised because as far as I see, the school board did put that request out to the taxpayers to keep that on the ballot, to keep collecting those funds, because according to them, they didn't have enough funds for that. And then if Mr. Wilson is questioning this flow of money into the school board and they haven't used it in almost 10 years, at some point, someone's got to ask each other the question. Because either you're going to use the money to benefit the kids and give them what they need, or you're not. Because our school population has gone down from 25,000 to 17,000, with more and more people exiting the school system for charter and alternative education, and none of this money is flowing over to charter. So I hope in the workshop that we're going to start asking a lot of questions that speak to smart spending, because the end user, the kids and the teachers and the parents and families are not seeing any of these dollars being invested. And this is local money, and I keep hearing, the state won't fund educating, but if we have local money sitting in a pot, I think collectively it's our responsibility to make sure it's being used. And if it's not being used, that it's given back to the taxpayers so they don't have to pay that additional fund. Because
I don't know where it's going to wind up. I don't know that what you're wanting out of the workshop is going to be the answer. And the reason why I say that is it would be the equivalent of us doing our capital improvement element of our comprehensive plan at the workshop. And so what you're asking is for the accountability, which I appreciate. And if you were to ask me of that as far as our capital improvement plan for parks and recreation and where we're going to spend those parks and recreation impact fees and what's the plan and all that. I mean, that's more of a, I don't know that that's going to be the crux of the workshop. I view the workshop going more about policy and procedure as far as the methodology and the implementation of a different impact fee schedule. So what you're asking, I'm not saying it's not appropriate, but I don't think the consultant's going to be able to answer that question as it relates to the school board in that workshop.
I think you guys have a responsibility to the taxpayers and the families and the students and the parents and the teachers and everyone in this county that when you have money allocated that's supposed to improve quality of life issues, that those things are carried out. That is part of your responsibility. I'm sorry. And you may disagree. We're going to disagree on this, but it is your responsibility. You're collecting the funds. You're distributing it. You're giving it to the school board. You asked them to get back to you. They didn't do that. You need to make it very transparent that they need to be accountable for those dollars. And if those dollars are not being spent, then someone needs to open the conversation to say, okay, we need accountability. Accountability because it's not getting to the end user. And just having money sit in limbo does not benefit anyone. That's my only thing. Sure. And we do these workshops and we do PowerPoints and presentations and we explain away our deficiencies, and it's time to stop doing that because the students in the school need to have this money spent wisely and appropriately and what it was intended for. There is no technology in the schools right now. Every other county is moving ahead with the level of technology that's needed. We are far behind, and we're taxing people and saying, give us the money, give us the money. We don't even have a decided curriculum. And I know this is not your platform, it's not your agenda, but you do have the responsibility as to the taxpayers to say, okay, guys, let's figure out what's going on here because we are accountable collectively and we're not separate entities, we're a community. And one thing affects the other. And if we don't improve education and if we don't get some things fundamentally straight, things do have a domino effect and cause you on the back end.
I don't know where me saying that, giving you some advance notice that you're going to ask the consultant a question at this workshop and it be construed as I don't want to be accountable for dollars or how dollars being
but please include it if you can in this workshop.
It's going to be the equivalent of asking him for lottery numbers. He's not going to know what you're talking about as it relates to the school board, and so that's. I just wanted to give you some advance. You're asking in this workshop. It's going to be about the methodology, and it's not going to be about what the school board did. And so, whether you agree with it or not, and it's please. This is not me saying I don't care what the school board does with their money. They spend it all they want to. That's not what I'm intending to say. But that's how I got accused of saying that what you're fixing to ask this consultant is not going to be addressed in there, and so that accountability is community-wide. I'm with you on that, but it's not going to be the consultant from Tallahassee.
Okay, forgive me, Commissioner Davis. Didn't you say it was going to be about policy?
It is going to be about policy, but it's the policy about the impact fees and how and the methodology of the impact fees. It's not about the school board having the policy about whether they want us to accept the impact fees.
Althea, they sent us an accounting of their capital plan, and we'll forward it to you. But if you're talking about policy matters regarding the school, they've got a whole elected board, and you need to attend those meetings. This board does not set policy for the schools. They have their separate board, separately elected. You should probably go and talk to them about that.
But Mr. Baird, if you disperse funds to any other entities in this county, you do hold them accountable for delivering the services. Yes or no? If you disperse money to the Humane Society or you disperse money. So there is some level of responsibility. It may not be hands-on, but I'm just saying that collectively, whether it's taxpayers, the school board, or anyone else, we have a responsibility to spend the money smartly and let it get to the end user. And if it's not getting to the end user, then we need to bring that money back in and redisperse it back to the taxpayers. So when we do workshops, I understand what their purpose is, but we always leave these open-ended,
You're at the wrong entity. You need to go to the school board.
I will,
School
sir.
board
I'll be
members.
happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Davis, your item.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Go ahead. I enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I really did. Dr. Sadwani has an issue coming up as far as needing to do, going back all the way to the days of the common sense ordinance. If you remember, we actually have the second part of that doesn't get used quite as much, but it's the, what was the term for it, Stan?
We had the functional equivalent portion of it.
The functional equivalent was my favorite part about the common sense ordinance. So anyhow, this is one of those areas where we have a functionally equivalent situation coming before us. I know I am jumping the gun a little bit on this, but Dr. Sadwani has mentioned that this is, she's really ready to move forward with it, and if I didn't bring it today forward as an emergency item, she'd be losing about 2 weeks at least on a good day. And so the long and short of it is the staff, I understand, Stan, you're good with this, being able to move this forward as a staff-initiated
Sure.
change?
I can give the board a little bit of background if the board would like.
Please.
Good. Please. Okay. We're all good, but Commissioner Solari needs a little help.
Yeah, he needs to be brought up to speed. He's buying coffee anyhow.
The subject property is located on the west side of US 1 and the north side of 87th Street. And it's kind of a peculiar situation. All the property in the area on both sides of US 1 and on both sides of 50th Avenue are zoned limited commercial and other types of commercial as well. And what we have here is a situation at the corner. Dr. Sadwani owns the property, actually that's all shaded in yellow. A few years ago, came in and redeveloped the old convenience store, which has also been retail since then, met our corridor requirements for upgrading the site, compatible property, did not expand the building at all, but did a really nice job of decreasing the nonconformity of that particular building. Several weeks ago, the doctor came in with a proposal, a pre-application conference with staff to add to the building, to extend it to the north, and to essentially put in some retail sales that would be associated with the practice that she has here in this existing building, extend the parking lot and so forth. The situation came about with the pre-app that 50th Avenue, this type of street or alley that's behind this particular parcel. Some of the questions dealing with how that came about, how much right-of-way is available there, how that actually functions. And if you'll see, this 50th Avenue comes all the way up by the old Wabasso School and turns into US 1, and all the properties along US 1 have this as kind of their back street, so to speak, and all these properties on US 1 narrow as you go further to the north. The question is, under the existing code, we don't have a definition for this type of street. It's we think, a unique situation in the county. The way setbacks are right now, 25-foot front yard setback would be required along this street. That's probably not the best way to handle these properties here on the east side of 50th Avenue. 50th Avenue actually functions like an alley in this situation for these properties, and it functions like a local street, a marginal access street for these. Staff believes that a good approach to handling not only this situation but the entire block here is to come up with a change in the LDRs to recognize this type of street and allow rear yard setbacks, which in commercial districts are less, along this edge. Properties will probably all be accessed off of US 1 until you get way up here to the north, and create and require a street buffer along the back. And then when these properties come and develop, this will be their only frontage, and this will be their access. It will be treated as a front yard. It's an odd situation, but we have it here in the county. We don't have a requirement in place to deal with it. Staff believes it does make sense to do an LDR amendment to address this type of street, and not do a case-by-case variance on these other properties, and to give more flexibility, because these properties get very narrow as you go to the north. So staff does think it's appropriate to do an LDR amendment for this type of street and these types of setback situations.
So basically, what I'm asking here with this emergency item is to give staff direction to go ahead and let's proceed with the staff-initiated LDR change on this.
Is that a motion?
Yes. Second.
Okay. We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Fletcher, to have staff move forward with a proposed ordinance to address this. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Solari?
Yeah, this is clearly the right thing to do. I mean, it does show that when you did the original plan, that planners aren't perfect, and we understand that. And it also goes to actually the Grand Harbor example, where you can set something or do something and set a plan, and then you realize that reality is different over time. And what Dr. Sidwani has done up there is something that's been great for the neighborhood. So, and she does want to expand the business. So my question is, how fast can we move on this to get it done as, you know, as reasonably as possible? But if she's ready to go, it'd be great if we weren't, if we were as helpful as possible to move it.
That's correct. I've given her kind of the worst case. I've told her 4 months to do a land development regulation amendment.
But you want to tell us 2 months?
I could tell you 2 months.
Okay. Good.
Could we advertise for all meetings today and get it set?
We do have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission first.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that is the second part of it, Commissioner Solari. That was the whole reason for bringing this up is we're holding up commerce here, so everything that we can do, let's get it done.
Okay. I think staff has a clear direction that we'd like this expedited. Okay. Bruce, did Dr. Swanee have anything to add at this point?
She just asked if she's allowed to stand up and say thank you.
She is. Wait, we haven't voted yet.
Take the vote, then you can say thank you.
Wait till they vote.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you so much.
I don't know. Who was the second?
Commissioner Fletcher.
Bob Johnson, Carlin Subdivision. I assume that this is just going to be for this one situation and not something that pertains to other situations in the county that may relate to similar situations. In other words,
Bob, Stan and I were on the phone for probably about a half hour just going all over the county with little alleys like
no,
this.
but sometimes these situations, all of a sudden these guys come before us and say, oh, we did,
I was thinking around in this area, for example, the road that cuts off by the Burger King up there, and Stan said, no, that wouldn't because that's multifamily right there or on one side. I mean,
I grew up in St. Petersburg, and there's alleys on every street over there. So I mean,
it's interesting that Bob Keating didn't have any of this in his career, and all of a sudden Stan finds it.
Am I correct, Stan? This is just going to be for this situation and not.
That's correct. The ordinance will be structured to deal with this street because we think it's unique.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob. Any other comments? Okay, motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Doctor, now you can stand up and say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Because this means a lot to not only me, but everybody in the community. It is a wellness center.
Why don't you just come on up and get on the speaker there.
I just want to thank you and let you know what I actually do and let the audience know what I do. It's a wellness center. The story started 20 years ago. I'm an internist, I'm a board certified, and I was like many other physicians writing prescription after prescription. Lo and behold, 10 years into the practice, my own son, who was 14 years old, developed inflammation in his colon and he started bleeding. Every GI specialist that I went in the country told me that his large colon is so ulcerated that we'd have to do colectomy and he would be with a bag for the rest of his life. So I started researching. I did not want to accept that as an answer, so I started researching and I found out that it's related to inflammation. So I went to the world-famous authority of inflammation, that's Dr. Barry Sears. He was then at MIT and Harvard. And I said, Dr. Barry Sears, I'm a physician in Vero, and my own son has a problem. So he said, okay, fly up to my office and I'll teach you. He taught me how wellness is created, how to control inflammation with diet, and the importance of omega-3 fatty acids, the fish oil. I put my own son on that program. He lost 60, 70 pounds, and within 3-4 years, his bleeding stopped, his ulcers stopped, and I could send him back to college in Boston. So I thought, oh, this is magical. So I started doing for 100 patients, people who were diabetic, they were on insulin, lot of cholesterol medication and everything, and they all started coming off the medication. So I used this as my profession. I became a board-certified inflammation and obesity specialist. And that's what I want to do for the rest of my life. I think there was a calling. I think God did that to my son because he needed somebody in Indian River County that can make people healthy and not rely on pharmaceutical medicines, because I've been there, done that. For 10 years, the pharmaceutical industry ruled my world. I was invited for best cruises, $1,000 vouchers, free lunch, free dinner, but that was not the way to go. Wellness is in our nutrition, and I want to spread that word. So I cannot thank you enough for doing this for me, really from the bottom of my heart. It will help all our community, absolutely. I'll make the building gorgeous. I'll put Wapaso on the map. I'll create 30, 40 jobs, and please, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Dr. Sadwani, you have already done that. As many of us may recall, that was a convenience store that was in need of repair. It had seen better days.
What was the convenience store?
I don't want to mention the name.
Okay, just make sure you knew, though.
It's a convenience.
National chain.
It was a national chain, and I think it was underutilized. And you have already put that place on the map. You have a beautiful site already.
Thank you.
And I believe today we're looking at knocking that log out of the dam so that you can flow and expand.
Thank you.
And I believe that your commitment, aside from your medical commitment, just your commitment to the community and to make that place what it is to be commended.
Thank you. Thank you. It means a lot coming from all of you, and thank you, all of you. Thank you so much for allowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Moving next, Commissioner Bob Solari, a memo and an update on All Aboard Florida. Commissioner Solari.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There are a number of things that have been happening with All Aboard Florida. Last week we had a petition from Vista Royale signed by 136 residents there that asked us to basically stop All Aboard Florida. Today I'm passing out another petition from the Timber Ridge Homeowners Association and members of the Vero Beach Tennis Club, which I believe is at Timber Ridge, and there are 152 other signatures. Last night there was a meeting at the South Beach Property Owners Association with about 75 attendees, and they expressed multiple significant concerns about All Aboard Florida. The IRNA has come out with a statement on All Aboard Florida, and there's just one sentence from it I'd like to read. And the IRNA, for the people who don't know, is the Indian River Neighborhood Association. The statement is, this project should not be approved without a clear showing that it will not be detrimental to the interests of our community. And I believe that is right. I met with Rusty Roberts of All Aboard Florida last Thursday and presented him with a long information request. And it's my understanding that Mr. Bush of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council is going to discuss this request at Friday's Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting, and if he does, I'll basically ask for support of other members of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and the council itself to get behind the information request. That information request certainly will not answer all the questions, but I believe it'll be the start of a dialogue, and it's requested the type of information dealing with some engineering, some finances, and the corporate structure that people have been asking. So I wanted to give you that update, and I believe there are some people from the audience who might want to speak about it.
Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is Alice Johnson. I am at 5470 East Harbor Village Drive in Grand Harbor. I'm speaking today as treasurer of the Indian River County Taxpayers Association, and we had a memorandum and a vote against All Aboard Florida. And all 16 members of our board voted against the following. We propose any loan guarantees, federal, state, or local, that would put taxpayers in jeopardy of losing money. We oppose any state funding for the train station at the Orlando airport. And we ask that the local governments require All Aboard Florida to pay for any noise abatement and crossing updates that would be logical for a high-speed train. That is what the taxpayers say. I'm going to speak as a private citizen. I am a retired financial executive, and I did a little analysis between this project and Acela. What you need to be successful in high-speed rail is a distance under 500 miles. And between New York and Washington is 230, and between Orlando and Miami is 233 miles. Similar distances. You must have a high population to feed this train. New York to Washington has a population of 11.4 million people. The city served by all aboard Florida, 940,000, 1/12 of the population. You need to have good public transportation feeding the railroad stations, and all the cities except for Baltimore have that along the Acela route. None of our cities have it along the all aboard Florida route. You have to be competitive with airfares. Now, the round-trip fare on Acela is $320 versus $480 on an airplane. So people have an economic reason for choosing it. However, the round trip between Miami and Orlando is only $270, which would mean that they should only charge $180. How can they run a train for $180 that costs $320 to run up north? So none of this makes any sense. You're never going to have the ridership. You're going to have massive losses. The private sector will default on the government loans. The taxpayers are going to get stuck for it, or worse, the taxpayers will have to continue paying for this ridiculous train ad infinitum. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Ms. Gower, this is the time. Thank you for patiently waiting. If you could give your name and address again, please.
Ellen Gower, 7435 Cypress Bend Manor in Vero Beach. I heartily concur with what Commissioner Solari is saying. I heartily concur with everything that Alice Johnson said. And I'm with the American Coalition for Property Rights. This group very much does not want to see the All-America train happen, all aboard Florida train happen. I've been happy to see that today in the Scripps Treasure Coast newspapers, there is another opinion page that is loaded with nothing but letters against all aboard Florida. We had the same thing in Sunday's paper, and I've cut out all of these pages. I think I've got a collection of about 8 or 10. All of the people that speak out, the public that speaks out against all aboard Florida, they are against it. There are some letters that say, well, there's no benefit to us now, but if they could ever stop in our region, that would be okay. I don't think those people realize that there are places in this country where railroads have been taken into sleepy little areas and have ruined those areas because, yes, they bring tourists there, but more than that, specifically I'm referring to Rutland, Vermont, when they had a train come to Rutland, Vermont from New York City. It's a new market for the drug dealers, and they come up on those trains by the dozens, and they spread out into these communities, and they sell their drugs, and the community people, presumably the teenagers, young adults who like that, get addicted and want them to keep coming. It fosters crime and drugs. We do not want stops in the Treasure Coast, primarily for that reason. So we are dead set against all aboard Florida. But just as Alice said, the financing does not make sense. There are not enough riders. It cannot be sustainable. We very much hope that this commission will move to write a letter to ask Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to please rescind the letter that it sent to, let me get this straight, they sent a memo of support for all aboard Florida to Tallahassee. We urge that this commission writes a similar letter to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council requesting that they rescind that letter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner,
Did you have a comment? Or, yeah.
No, just on what she was asking. I don't remember seeing a copy of that letter. That didn't mean that I didn't get it sent.
Well, I think it was a memo. Okay. It was a long memo that was discussed at the last Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council meeting, And I think one of the problems was, which I mentioned at the meeting, was that it contained too many things. Some of the items in there almost seemed like the Rahm Emanuel, don't let a crisis go to waste.
Yes.
And they tossed in other agenda items which were really sort of separate from the issue at hand.
Yes.
And I'd agree with, to the extent that, you know, this issue is a very troubling issue, and we probably ought to be more focused on 2 or 3 things.
Yes.
And that's why I mentioned at the last meeting there, but I think that if this board feels that it's appropriate to focus in on the 2 or 3 pertinent items, one being the extension of the EIS from 45 to 90 days, the second to press forward to try to get as much accurate information as possible, because basically we don't have the information. And at the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council and a meeting with Rusty Roberts last Thursday, the thought was that, well, we're a private company, we don't have to give any of that information out. The response is, well, you're asking for a lot of government support, and you're having an incredible impact in our community, so we certainly have a responsibility to ask the information. So there are at least those 2 items, and there may be a third or so. But if this board would like me to do that, I would try to get the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to do as they ask and rescind that memo and replace it with something that's clearer, cleaner, and more to the immediate point.
Terse.
Yeah.
Terse. Fantastic.
You have one more. Yes. Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Could we have a copy of that?
Nick Schaus, Sable Oak Drive. I was here 4 weeks ago and asked you to ask the Planning Division to start work on preparation for the publication of the EIS, so we would be prepared to, when it's submitted, to react to it. And I think you did that, and the Planning Division is really busy, I see. I think that in our favor, the timing is going to be relaxed. I wouldn't see how the EIS would be published until the FRA does an analysis of all of the crossings in this county and Brevard. And of course, we know that they've just gotten to St. Lucie, and they believe that they'll start again in this county in June. So we can't relax, but I think we do have some more time with the EIS. And I read that, as you know, the EIS was, or the EA was approved last year for the southern section, and I read in there that the FRA has 3, or at least 2 options. After one is called a FONSI, which they said FONSI for the southern section, which finding of no significant impact. And so I've taken and seeing if maybe our battle cry here could be, say, no FONSI for us. What we want is, their other option is, do not build. That's what they say in the EIS. So this is the option we're all for. And I agree, the March 10th letter or memo from Busha to our governor, I mean, it contains things like it's passenger rail here is a long priority, and we want immediately the FDOT to advance Amtrak and FEC along here. This isn't what your constituents want. This thing is really moving like a tidal wave. And then the March 21st, the TCRPC, from the staff, and the staff really is driving all this, to the council, to you all, have a passenger rail has been a long-standing priority. Well, I've already said this. But your constituents don't want this. I've driven along the track for almost the entire length, and I won't bore you with, but coming in from St. Lucie County, Florida Ridge with 95 houses is the first place you see. They don't want this. Then you have Grove Island, Dixie Heights. You've already mentioned Vista Royale. 4 weeks ago I went in and saw Henry Robinson and gave him some papers about this, and that produced 137 petitions. Gifford is right on the tracks. We've already heard Grand Harbor. They're going to be affected. How about the golf courses? The golf courses are significant here. They're along the railroad, Hawks Nest, Sand Ridge, Red Stick, Johns Island West, and then as you go forth, mobile homes. The mobile homes are going to be rattled to death. They are against this. Across the river, and Commissioner Solari just told you about the meeting in North of Moorings, the noise is going to be a detriment to property values, even though they're maybe 2 miles to 1.5 miles from the exact railroad. And Indian River Shores, we're going to have a public meeting next week, and on up Orchid and Windsor will all be affected by the noise and the real estate values and the assessment and the ultimate ability to raise taxes. So thank you, which you can do first, I think, for the Treasure Coast Planning Commission. Thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to speak? Nick, or Tuck, we'll have this gentleman, and then go to
sorry.
you. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Me first?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Sean Frost, 1301 38th Avenue. I wanted to address this issue and thank the Commission for taking it up. As someone who grew up here and then decided to move back here after the Marine Corps, I think we can all agree that there's a certain character of living that we've come to understand and that we appreciate. This train coming through here 32 times a day is going to create problems not only in safety, but as they've mentioned, property values. And my father is actually holding off on building his house because of the impact fees. Of course, as we understand today, that's the purview of the school board, and that's where the action has to take place. However, the school board is going to incur costs should this come through as well. The gentleman mentioned Gifford. Imagine being in the science lab there as the train comes through.
800 feet away.
There's going to be abatement costs, whether it's noise, vibrational dampening, all sorts of issues. So we have to work together to stop this. Of course, working with the school board, that's where the impact fees are going to come up. So we have to do all we can to curtail this. And I appreciate anything the Commission can do in reaching out to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Board and taking a stand against all aboard Florida. And that's, I appreciate you and ask that you continue to stay on this topic. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tuck?
Tuck Farrell. I'm wearing a 12546 North Highway A1A. I'm wearing a couple of hats. I'm wearing a personal hat because I oppose the way they're doing this, and the other hat is for the North Beach Civic Association. It's one of our main things I hear from our constituents, the concerns about the trains, the noise. But I was involved with the bullet train that they were trying to put in years ago, and there was a different approach, because I don't want to repeat what everyone else has said. They were trying to put it west. It was going to be an elevated train along 95 or the Turnpike, and it wasn't going to impact the downtown areas and split them apart. And this train is in the downtown area, and it's a high-speed train. And we were going to put that out west, where it was more appropriate. This is not a slow train. It's a high-speed train, but it's going out of downtown. So the whole intent of this, the basis for it, is probably wrong thinking. It should have been placed where they were going to put it before. And it was unfortunate, possibly, that we didn't get the high-speed rail, but there were going to be stops, and it was going to be west of town, and it was going to be more in open areas or along the interstates. And this is right in the downtown. It's a whole different animal. Now, the other thing is, what happens if this fails? I'm hearing a lot of things that this may be a way just to fund freight. And there may be a planned failure. I mean, I know about Fortress. I used to own stock in Fortress. It wasn't a very pleasant experience. They own the FEC, and they own gaming companies. We don't know what the whole situation here is. There's a lot going on here. They're involved in gambling, and they own gaming companies in Florida and all over the United States. There's a lot to think about. But what if this fails? They're just going to turn it over as a freight rail. That's what's going to happen. And that may be the thought. Because as everyone knows, and it's all over in different counties, that the Panama Canal is being widened. The ships are going to be larger. There's going to be all this freight coming in. So how do you deal with this? Well, Fort Lauderdale and Miami and other places are really working on this freight thing. And I don't know that this is not a ploy to get freight money.
I agree.
And if this thing fails, then the government's on the hook. You and I, the citizens, are on the hook for this money. And that's what's going to happen. None of these rails are going to make them, they're not going to pay the money. It's not going to make it financially. It's probably not feasible. They don't have the ridership. All of them are supplemented. They're all losers, and it just concerns me about where this is going. And I don't think we should have public financing. I think we should come out against public financing and be very careful about this. And that's what they're asking for. I was at all their meetings when they started to push this railroad and the train left the station. There's nothing you can do. Well, now they want us to pay for all the crossings, and I think we should oppose that. We need to write, if we could write letters, we need to oppose paying for these crossings, which the other lady brought up and other people have brought up. But we could get stuck for all these bills, and they should pay for the crossings. And they're the ones that are going faster than normal. It's a high-speed rail in a place that's designed for a lower-speed corridor. And the chances of this making it may not be that high. And we may get stuck with paying for this, the public. And there may be bills that we don't know about in the county. The county may get stuck for some of these bills, but we shouldn't have to pay for all their crossings. Because they said they were going to pay for everything in the beginning. They even said they were going to pay for the crossing. Now it's all changed. So I'm very careful. Having owned stock in that company at one time, and I won't say anything about the company, but it was not a pleasant experience, and I'm not buying everything that we're being told. Thank you.
But Tuck, before you go, Tuck, let's go ahead and assume that you're correct on the freight scenario.
Right.
Okay. So let's walk through that and see what our worst case, best case scenarios are. Okay. Right now, you're correct. We know the Panama Canal is going to be deepened and widened. It's going to be done next year.
That's right.
We know Port of Miami is already dredging and widening the Port of Miami to handle the larger freighters. So that's going to be a done deal. Okay, those are two things we can't change. And you mentioned it yourself. How do we deal with it, right?
Right.
So currently, right now today, what's our biggest issue with the freight trains on tracks coming through the county? The fact that there's a
safety.
No, the freight trains are pretty slow moving. The biggest issue I see is we have a very narrow stretch of double track. Really? And just Saturday morning, I was driving up to an event, and sure enough, there was a mile-long freight train stopped, blocking multiple crossings, because it was having to wait for another mile-long freight train coming the other way, and they would have to time it to do the double track at the same time. Okay?
That's right.
So, under the current scenario we have right now today, we know more freight's coming into Miami. There'll be more freight on the railroad tracks. I see the worst case scenario is we're going to have more instances where mile-long trains are backed up for long periods of time, blocking multiple crossings.
That's true.
And that does have an impact on traffic, emergency vehicles, all that. So if their ultimate goal is to double track it, okay, I see that as a benefit to the county because now those trains will be able to pass each other without having to stop and block multiple crossings. Okay? So, you know, if we walk down the road and we know the freight's coming, we know it's coming to Miami, and we know it's going to be moving north, how do we deal with that impact? I think double tracking eliminates that impact.
And I don't disagree.
Double
with anything.
tracking's not a bad idea.
No, it's
but
not. I mean, and in fact, if
more
it's
trained
for economic development and jobs, and that, moving commerce around is better than the interstate system, and cheaper and cleaner, and and more efficient. But the problem is how do you deal with a situation where, if that is the end result, they didn't start out telling you that?
Well, and I agree. I'm not saying the process has been good, but I'm just saying if that's the end result, I think double tracks to the county is a benefit to us to handle the freight.
I'm just in awe
I'm just saying that.
How galvanized the community is. I mean, I haven't seen anything that so many people have been on the same page before, well, since the Summer Place Sewer Project. I had to go there, right?
No, it's almost like Lagoon Who.
Yeah, exactly.
Lagoon,
I just like to know what's going on and try to figure out what's the end game. What's the end game to all this? I don't know.
Just my point is, I think sometimes we just need to look at everything down the road, what we can change and what we can't, and what those impacts may or may not be. And I think the freight thing is a valid concern, but where I'm sitting, I think double tracks will alleviate the impact we currently get, and certainly it'll get worse if more freight trains start running again.
This may be a ploy, though, to get, say, we're a passenger and you get all these government guarantees and loans as a passenger.
Yeah, I understand the process.
I think you're on it. For government money, you use techniques to get things out of the government, and that may not be the final end game.
Yeah,
that's all.
I agree with you there, but I'm just saying let's walk through it, and if freight is the ultimate, I think double tracks would be good. So, Ms. Scott.
Thanks.
Good morning. I'm Wanda Scott, 4306 26th Avenue in Gifford, and I'm a business owner. I'm part of the Mosley Family Grocery Store, which is 53 years old, one of the oldest business districts in Gifford, and we're directly, 2 blocks from the railroad track, off the 43rd Street railroad track. I'm here to ask for consideration. I'm on the same team as most of the people who have stood up, because all I'm looking at is how we are impacted as business owners, just day to day, when the lines are, the tracks are full and you can't get across, having to go to the emergency room, how are you going to get around if it's blocked all the way to 53rd or all the way up to, airport, how are you going to get someone to the hospital in time? And then you have these additional fast speed, this train coming. I don't see that kind of positive. We're paying a lot of taxes for sort of a rundown infrastructure, and then we're going to have to pay more taxes for a train that's going to impact us from noise, vibrations. I know sometimes just after I get to studying, I lay down about 3-something, and then the trains, they start their woo-woo 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I'm wide awake, and so I can imagine having more trains coming through, which is, we're already impacted. We're already impacted, and very little benefit to our community. So I just would ask for consideration to really look at this thing. Gifford, it's going to impact on our property value of our homes and our businesses, and we will get very little. That's my phone. Sorry about that.
Just let it play.
Okay. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Ms. Scott, as you mentioned, I don't believe that any one of your, that's somebody else's now. So we have a little, anybody else want to go on? As you mentioned, that you were consistent with the other speakers, I don't believe there's anybody that would be opposed to what you said other than a visitor of the community, and that would be Mr. Rusty Roberts. We posed some of those questions to him at the MPO, and that was several months ago. I specifically asked for an address regarding the crossing so close, dangerously close to the Gifford Middle School, just several hundred feet away from the tracks, is one of our most precious resources. And when I approached him, I said, I would like an answer regarding that. It was during the meeting and after the meeting. And I know he's alive because I guess he met recently, but I have not heard from him in several months regarding that. That's no, and I'm not beating up on the All Aboard Florida network, but I will say that we have been led by nothing but misinformation, pages left intentionally blank, and we attended, I know Mr. Tuckfarrell was there and several of you were there at the West Palm expose of the All Aboard Florida. Nothing was mentioned about the word high speed. Nothing was mentioned about we would have to pay all of the impacts. What was mentioned is that the area did not have a stop, that would not be on the first wave of application. And when that was discussed, many of the commissioners or individuals, I know Commissioner Zork, I know you had been there and posed that too. I subsequently asked a very similar question as when we anticipate a stop. And again, that was the board's focus, because all that was presented appeared to be valid, that this was a privately funded operation. Emphatically, Mr. Rusty Roberts said, we are not seeking any funding from you. Well, if you're not seeking any funding from us, then why are we going to be paying for enhanced crossings? Well, we'll pay for the crossings to the level of that's expected to us, realizing that this is approximately a 54-mile-an-hour track. I believe that's the maximum speed that the trains go. I did patrol the area and used to drive at about the average speed that they did travel, which was about 40 to 43. And I don't see a 70 to 110 mile an hour train going through this community without slowing down and not creating or posing a tremendous threat. We discussed that as well, and I was told that most certainly during in populated communities there'll be safety mechanisms, there'll be safety warnings, and the train would be slowing down. Now we're told that that would only be counterproductive, that would only interfere with the safe operation, and that the other trains, even though we're talking about a discussion on dual tracking, you still would have the possibility, I am not a train engineer, but you have a train traveling at 100 miles an hour, and you have a train traveling at maybe 40 to 50 miles an hour, and the tracks will be that close, that there may be another hazard that will be addressed as well. And anybody that rode a New York City subway train can feel that as you're whizzing by another train, and they only travel at about 35 to 40 miles an hour. Can you imagine 100 miles an hour? So I believe that we've been told a lot of misinformation. I recently heard that, well, this commission supported this concept in the beginning, that a commissioner had wanted to bring it forward, that a commissioner came in and another commissioner came in, and, well, that was based on misinformation, false and empty promises, and unguaranteed values that have now been recently exposed. And I agree with you, and Commissioner Davis, I have not heard from any one member of the community that said, bring on the trains.
Fred Menzing.
What?
Fred Menzing.
Fred was in favor.
Well, Fred has.
Yeah, that's right. He did speak, but it was good for economic development.
Just let me correct you on a couple things. One is...
One at a time so I can address them, please.
Even back in 2012, the proposed All Aboard Florida project was high speed. It's always been high speed from day one.
There was not a word high speed on any one of the brochures, the displays, the pictorials, or the projected images on the wall in that meeting. High speed was not part of the nomenclature. It was passenger rail service.
It's always been high speed, Commissioner. The second thing is there's never been a proposed stop in Vero Beach. It's always been Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, in Orlando.
And you're not correcting me on that, because I said that we were told that there was no stop.
Okay. So back in May of 2013, as chairman, you signed a letter that this board voted. It was a motion by Commissioner Zork, second by Commissioner Solari, that we signed a letter of support for the All Aboard Florida project, knowing it was high-speed and knowing there was no stop. The letter of support also included support for the state right-of-way to be granted to them along the 528 corridor. So we were supporting them getting support from the state. And then third, there was part of the letter was a very friendly and undemanding request that they consider a stop in Vero Beach. But we sent that letter of support knowing full well it was high speed and no stop in Vero Beach.
You know, that type of rhetoric...
well, it's not rhetoric.
No, it is.
I can show you
It's
the copy
just
of
the
the letter
same way
itself,
as when we point out 750 about how this commission, when we're in the MPO, have fully supported the HUD program, that we're looking out for the people. And the information that we received, yes, it was a 5-0. That's why I brought up that whole 750 thing. It was a 5-0. And we did have full support. And we were told that we would be looking at a stop at the second phase or the third phase in the future. We were told that there was some financing, but this was a private enterprise. So there's a lot of misinformation. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate the little gyrations, too. The information was inaccurate, inappropriate, and unfair.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm the first to admit that I made a mistake by not getting involved in this earlier. When I was first told it was a private company doing a private project on private tracks. And I was told in my office by all the Board of Florida residents that it wouldn't involve any federal funds. And personally, having just been battered by trying to fight Amtrak, I figured this was none of my business. If this board and this community wanted Amtrak, which was subsidizing on the base of $9 for every dollar of ticket revenue, I wasn't going to get involved. I made a mistake by doing that. The community has woken me up, and I'm reacting to my mistake. I'll note that in just as recently as Friday's Press Journal, they had an article where it was Senator Negron who initially thought the best thing was, again, not to get in the way and to help it, because, again, we have a bias for economic development, and I think it's the reflex of this board to want to support economic development. I know I certainly do. But in that article, Senator Negron said, you know, I initially put the money for quiet zones in the budget, and now I'm not so sure it's the right thing. So Senator Negron, on getting more information, has changed his mind. I certainly have changed my mind, and at this point, I'd just like to make a motion, if I could, to ask the board, if they want, when I go down to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council on Friday, that they rescind the March 10th memo, and they focus on basically three things. One, extending the EIS study from 45 to 90 days. Second, supporting the public information request that I drafted with basically a focus on getting the type of information necessary for the public and elected officials to make a reasoned and rational decision before any federal funds has been made available. And it was mentioned to me last night that the federal government has sealed corridor requirements that the state of Florida doesn't have, which at least would put the onus on that if it does come, the burden of financing that, which would basically sort of consume or take care of the quiet zones, put that on the All Aboard Florida people. So to just ask the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council to investigate the federal regulations to see if it would be appropriate for the Florida legislature, which again my understanding is they don't really have regulations for expecting trains faster than 79 miles per hour, to see if these regulations for high-speed trains would be appropriate for the state of Florida.
Second.
Thank you.
It was pretty high speed.
I'm trying to catch up with the train, but I'm puffing and puffing.
No, we got it.
Yeah.
Dylan, did you get all those?
He wrote it down.
Generally, yes. Essentially, the request on Friday that would be brought to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council by Commissioner Solari would essentially be, one, them on board with our request for the extension to 90 days. Additionally, the follow-up on Commissioner Solari's public records, or not public information requests. I believe
not public, just information requests.
Information requests. I believe these are the information requests that have been made directly to All Aboard Florida. Is that correct?
That's correct. I
Commissioner
presented
Solari?
to him last Thursday.
And then
Michael Bush already has a copy of it, and he's already disseminated it to all the members of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
And then the third action item or item is just essentially dealing with the sealed corridors and essentially looking for our board Florida to be funding those federal sealed corridor requirements.
No, it began with the rescission of the March 10th memo. That would be that's included in the memo. And
included in that then would be the rescission of the March 4th memo.
Okay.
Yep.
And which one of you was first? It almost sounded...
Either
Doesn't matter. I think you're going to have enough enough speed on this rail.
We'll go with Commissioner Davis. All right. Any further discussion on the motion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say I appreciate you pointing out the near identical words that Mr. Busher spoke in regards to this commission being in support and now not in support, and that the chairman did sign off on a letter that was fully supported by 5 county commission members of this board, and did forward that correspondence, and now suddenly is shifting their support. It's not a shift of support, it's a shift of knowledge. And when you have a shift of knowledge, then you have to be wise enough to understand the knowledge that you've been exposed to is accurate. And being true leaders, I think we have an obligation to respond to knowledge as opposed to expression and opinion. Thank you.
Okay. All in favor of the motion signify with aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Next.
Mr. Chairman, also under All Aboard Florida, separately, I was traveling through Volusia County a few days ago, and on the front page of their paper was Volusia County looking at pledging 1 cent local option sales tax to pay their $88 million contribution to the Central Florida, I'm trying to think of the name of the
Transit Authority?
Is that Sunrail?
Maybe it's Sunrail.
Might be Sunrail.
Is to make sure we look at that we have a prohibition or a rule that permits us from ever pledging that 1 cent local option tax to that type of endeavor. They don't have a 1 cent local option tax, so they're looking at passing a 1 cent local option tax to help pay off their $88 million commitment they've made to that. And a couple of other, it's not solely for that, but it's a long-term commitment. But I was surprised that I didn't think Volusia, I know it's bigger than us, but I didn't realize they're that big. But if their chunk is $88 million, that's a pretty big.
Well, it's Daytona. I mean, you got.
There's a glitch in the optional sales tax law. Only charter counties can pledge optional sales tax.
Okay.
For home rule counties cannot.
How about
so
that?
It's a little bit of a glitch. I don't know why.
Lord.
Okay. You know what?
So another benefit of not supporting charter government in our county.
Right. Okay.
We just had to go there, didn't we, Peter?
I wouldn't have been supportive of tying the hands in the future commissions anyway.
Let's blame it on Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay. Commissioner Zork.
Yes, sir.
You have an item, the Florida Municipal Power Agency meeting.
Yes, and since this was put on, things have evolved a little bit the last couple of days. So the presentation is going to be similar, but the dates in question are going to be different. Originally, there was a move afoot to attend this particular Thursday's April 17th FMPA meeting as a group to show up. Originally, we thought we would be hearing positive responses on the $52 million proposal, and hear the reaction from the other FMPA members. After Mayor Winger from the city met with FMPA, that deal is off the table, so we don't know what's going to happen at the meeting on the 17th. However, I do think there is a significant value to be gained by making a presence at the May board meeting, that presence being as large as possible in bringing people from Vero Beach to, I want to say, peacefully demonstrate our dissatisfaction with FMPA's lack of cooperation, lack of concern of a member that wants to get out, changing the rules. I was there when they announced the $52 million deal and how positive it was proposed, how they thought it would, address the different concerns of the other members. And now that we've addressed the concern, then they go, oh, well, then we're going to take that off the table, and it seems like come up with something else to postpone the sale. Every day that this sale goes by, it's $54,000 a day to the ratepayers of City of Vero Beach utilities, whether you're in the county or if you're served by them at any capacity for electric. So I probably will be coming back with the approach of how to make a significant impact at the May, I believe it's going to be the May 15th meeting. Also tonight, the City Council is also looking at changing, potentially maybe discussing their representatives of who will be representing the city at the FMPA. I think that might be up for tonight as well. And
Who does it now? Who currently is it?
Pilar Turner.
Okay.
We always have that table for 12 just for Pilar and I, and the rest of the room, doesn't sit with us, but that's their way of welcoming us to the FMPA group. So plan to hear a little bit more at the next meeting, see what transpires over the next few days. I will be attending the meeting on the 17th and report back to you what dramatically changed to where, okay, we can make this work, and then now they take it off the table. So I want to hear their explanation.
And you're submitting those expenses for reimbursement for travel?
Yes, for those when we go over there.
Making sure.
Right. And then one of the items that was discussed at the Taxpayers Association that I brought up, that after going through meeting with some other groups or attending different luncheons or functions, I've heard, the focus is the FMPA is the obstacle. These people that are the representatives of the FMPA, they come into that room, they're there. I don't know what their home representatives that send them there really know what's going on, but I think we need to put them into the spotlight. They need to see we're not happy with them, and a show of force of people attending, being there, and again, peacefully just saying we're not happy with them. I'd like to maybe have 150 people come over there with us and say we're not happy with them.
I've got an idea. What we can do is we can say that we're going to have the final determination on all aboard Florida and the summer place sewer thing over there.
And the fertilizer ordinance.
Can you squeeze all the government in there? A special guest appearance from Dancing with the Stars.
We could fill the whole corridor. There will be some logistics that have to be worked out to put all this together, but I'll be bringing that back. Want to see what happens on this Thursday, and then come up with an appropriate strategy. But I do personally believe the FMPA is the obstacle in moving this forward. After the February meeting, how excited that the representative from FMPA was speaking to the other members. Something obviously went awry between meetings, so I'm looking forward to hearing that on Thursday, what's taking place. And I'll report back with our plan of what I think might be an appropriate plan of action to bring our dissatisfaction closer to them, because they don't get to see it. They're in a little bubble when they're inside their room. They're all very chummy, but if they had to walk through a gauntlet of 100 people or so, they might realize, gee, those people over in Vero really want to get out of this deal. So I'll come back with something at the next, probably the next meeting or so.
Okay, thank you. Joe, one thing, could you get a hold of Phil Matz and ask him to come back, please? With the board's permission, there's an event related to All Aboard Florida that might be going on this week here in the county, and I wanted Phil to update us on that, and I forgot to.
I can give a mini update. You're talking about the Thursday sort of delegation meeting?
Yes.
Well, I actually talked to Stan Boeing about that, I think it was this morning, because I hadn't heard anything about it.
Right.
And evidently there have been some issues with Sunshine about it, and there's actually, the bottom line is, they're not sure if they're going to have it, and I asked Stan to let me know if they were going to have it, but if they did have it, it may be limited to staff and maybe a representative or something like that. So
I know that Representative Mayfield had conversations with St. Lucie Commission Chairman Franny Hutchinson about this tour. In my talks with Debbie, she kind of indicated she wanted to hear from the local officials, and that became problematic with the Sunshine issue. And then talking to Phil, it seems like it's being organized as a staff event, but I just wanted to see if there's one, and I thought maybe if we just designated one commissioner to be available to meet if Debbie did want a local presence, that would not create a Sunshine issue. And just if there's a commissioner who might be available, I think they're scheduled Thursday from 2 to 4 was the last I heard. 2 to 4. So I don't know if gentlemen, if any of you would like to volunteer to kind of be on call in case. Oh, wait, I see Commissioner Slaughter raise his hand.
Imagine that.
So, Bill, just on the tour thing coming up, Again, my understanding was Representative Mayfield did want to hear from the local officials, but I understand the sunshine conflict. So as this thing comes together over the next day or two, Commissioner Solari has volunteered to be the one elected official that would attend if that would be Debbie's request.
And if I may add, and obviously other counties may want their commissioners, I had a conversation with Ed Fielding, and he suggested that I get together with him and somebody from St. Lucie County to sort of form a group about this, and I said, no, we can't do that, because we're all on the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
Right.
So just suggest, as the process unfolds, that no other commissioner be a member of the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council.
And don't overlook our local MPO.
Right. None of the city representatives could be there.
The one problem we could have is that with the MPO, let's say Commissioner Solari goes to look at one in Sebastian and a city councilman
Well, that's what I just said.
her. We're done. They cannot.
Right. That's what I said. Don't overlook our local MPO.
Right.
I've managed to sit here quiet for long periods of time. If there's a Sebastian city council member, I'll do the same.
Pinky swear? I mean...
What I heard essentially is if we put this together and we can figure out a way that we are in compliance with the Sunshine Law, that Commissioner Solari would be the one member of our commission who would be
If we cannot be in compliance with the Sunshine Law, hopefully we can meet.
Yeah.
Then we don't have to worry about it.
This might help. My understanding of the tour is it begins at 9 in Martin County. The Martin delegation is mostly going to be contained to Martin because they're the ones most interested in Martin issues. They may get on the bus and get off in Martin by 11, whereupon the bus will go to St. Lucie and do a midday tour of St. Lucie. Then, when they discharge the St. Lucie contingent, they'll be up here at, in the mid-afternoon sometime. So I don't know that there are going to be different representatives from different jurisdictions on the bus at the same time unless somebody wanted to go all the way down for the full tour all the way down to Martin from here and vice versa. That complicate things or make it easier?
No. Well, Phil, again, if it's requested and we can do it without a violation, Commissioner Solari would be the one to ask.
Okay, I'll get with Dylan and we'll go over the options.
Okay, thank you all.
Absolutely.
And then, Commissioner Zork, on your matter with the FMPA, I know that the taxpayers apparently had suggested the county rent a bus. And I know the county administrator had gotten a quote, but I think Dylan had some real concerns about liability and waivers and stuff, and I wasn't too excited about that idea either. So just as you put that together, I think going forward, I wasn't excited about the county paying for a bus and taking on the responsibility, but just so you know, as you go forward and put your
is use of our parking facilities. I know that then creates similar liability. We've had other people want to use this place for staging area for overflow parking for the air show or other things. But
if the public want to come here and park as a gathering, I don't. The public can park here anyway. I don't think our liability changes for that.
Can't stop them.
So that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Okay. And so, Commissioner Zork, your item then was just for information at this point. We're not doing anything. Okay, thank you. And finally, we get to the Solid Waste Disposal District, final pay to Geosyntec for work order number 7 for 1 year of groundwater monitoring.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Solari, second from Commissioner Flesher. Vinny, is there anything we need to know before we proceed? Okay, looks good. Any comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and we hope we see everybody out at historic Dodgertown tonight for the game. It starts at 6:30.
I think gates open at 5.
Gates open at 5,
Yeah.
right. Okay.
For some kids' activity.
Yes, Ms. Gower.
Make a general announcement. I heard you talking about the Blue Angels, right?
They're coming in May to the city of Vero Beach.
They're coming in May, but the federal government funds them up only to a point. And I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Oles. He's a Vero Beach resident. Yes. He was an amazing jet fighter pilot in Desert Storm. He has come back. He's trying to help resurrect America, building through entrepreneurs and small business and veterans. And he's doing an amazing job. He just informed us on Saturday that this Blue Angels show is $40,000 underfunded. He has got a program going to help fund this deficit in the month's time that we have, like less now, a few days short, to get them to come here. His website is patriotmission.org. There is his plan there. He's got he has a videographer who records veterans' stories, a lot of them from World War II. He's catching them before they die. And this videographer has offered to do veterans' stories for $99, which is about a tenth of what it really costs him. If people will donate $99 to this videographer for making a veteran's story, he'll donate 30 of it to the Blue Angels show. And he'll also give the donor a ticket to the Blue Angels show. It's all on that website, patriotmission.com. Just wanted to make a general announcement since you brought that up.
.com or .org? I thought you said org earlier.
Oh, did I? I think it's, no, it's .com.
.com.
It's
Okay.
.com.
If you Google Patriot Mission, it'll come right. It's the first one.
And Steve Olds is a remarkable guy. If anybody can pull this off, he can do it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, with that, we're adjourned.
I think you're getting a bag of beans. That's what you're going to get.